Chapter 1523. May I ask who surrendered? Xiao Feng asked with a frown. Prince Consort Xiao Xiaomao, Xiao Ban, and Yalu Qi, these two traitors, to think that we trusted them so much. How dare they kidnap the people closest to us? They deserve to die. Yalu Hongji smashed the expensive teacup in front of him with a slap. Hearing Yalu Hongji's words, Xiao Feng and Xiao Pity were rendered speechless. Both of them understood Yalu Hongji's personality very well, and hearing the cold tone in his voice, they understood that if they continued to persuade him, they would only invite trouble to themselves. At this time, Song Qingshu also learned from Zhao Min that the situation had gone out of control. He couldn't help but frown. It's really troublesome now that it's come to this. Zhao Min chuckled. Actually, this matter may seem troublesome on the surface, but it's actually an opportunity for you. What do you mean? Song Qingshu was confused. Zhao Min stood with her hands clasped behind her back, indifferently saying, "Our prairies dynasties are different from your Han dynasties. We don't believe in bullshit like if the ruler wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die. Your Han dynasty's power comes from the emperor, so you naturally have no ability to resist. However, our country's power comes from its own tribes. In a large tribe, there are many loyal warriors. Yalu Qi, as the commander of all the palaces in Liao, holding such a high position at such a young age, he has at least 1,000 private soldiers under his command. How could he watch as he is wrongly killed?" Song Qingshu was taken aback. "Then why do you say this is an opportunity for me?" Zhao Min explained, "Right now, the Golden Snake Battalion is like the sun in the sky, but it's a pity that most of the Golden Snake Battalion's leaders started out as mountain kings. They can rob and pillage, but they can't do anything to conquer the world. Right now, other than a bunch of women, you don't have many subordinates who could take charge. Yalu Qi is a rare talent of the younger generation. Not only is he skilled in both the pen and the sword, but he's also a rare gentleman. If you can subdue him, you'll have one more right-hand man. Yalu Qi is indeed a rare talent." When Song Qingshu and Zhao Min were chatting, they subconsciously did not mention Song Qingshu, Zhang Wuji, and the others. After all, they were all nature-defying existences. Their strength was enough to talk and laugh with the giants of the previous generation in the martial arts world. It was difficult to lump them together with the younger generation. But he has always been loyal. Why would he turn to the Golden Snake Battalion? Of course, not under normal circumstances, but this is a great opportunity, Zhao Min replied. If they're convicted of rebellion, not only will Yalu Qi not be able to escape death, but his family will also not be able to escape misfortune. These emperors of the grasslands are merciless when it comes to killing people. Considering that the surrounding Manchurian Qing and Jin Kingdom are old enemies of the Khitans, and our main force is now on the Western expedition, we may not be willing to offend our ally Liao for him. Western Xia is also too far away. At this time, if you extend an olive branch to them, they will most likely agree." Zhao Min paused and smiled. After all, the Golden Snake Battalion is their best choice now. What's more, the territory controlled by the Golden Snake Battalion is not only no weaker than Liao, but even slightly stronger. They have no reason not to choose you. Song Qingshu's eyebrows moved. Originally, I thought that the Golden Snake Battalion was somewhat unpresentable. I didn't expect the princess to think so highly of them. I am somewhat flattered. You don't have to belittle yourself. Zhao Min looked back at him. In the past 2 years, the Golden Snake Battalion has been the most famous in the world. They can compete with all the countries in the world. Who in the world would dare to treat them as bandits? Hearing her words, Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel heroic. Then I'll see if I can subdue Yalu Qi. However, Song Qingshu quickly realized a problem. I have met Yalu Qi a few times before. Although we can't be considered as deep friends, we are still on equal footing. Now that he has become my subordinate, he may not be able to get used to this change. Don't worry. Leave the matter of persuading Yalu Qi to surrender to me. A confident glow flashed across Zhao Min's cheeks. Admiring the incomparable elegance of the woman in front of him, Song Qingshu suddenly said with a faint smile, For the sake of Mongolia's interests, shouldn't the princess persuade Yelu Qi to surrender to Mongolia? Why would you persuade him to bring people to surrender to the Golden Snake Battalion? Zhao Min snorted. Mongolia is now in the honeymoon period of their alliance with Liao. If we accept him, it is tantamount to publicly embarrassing Yelu Hongji. At that time, we will lose the bigger picture because of a small gain. Is that really the case? Song Qingshu smiled meaningfully. Zhao Min frowned and said, "What else? Speaking of which, why are you smiling so strangely?" Song Qingshu laughed mischievously. I thought the princess was preparing her dowry. After saying that, he used his lightness skill and ran outside. Zhao Min's white as jade face instantly flushed red. You bastard! But looking at his gradually disappearing figure, the anger in her stomach finally dissipated unknowingly. Instead, she chuckled, and her eyes became incomparably gentle. Standing there, she became even more charming and charming. Meanwhile, after Song Qingshu came out from Zhao Min's place, he happened to run into Xia Qingqing, who had just returned from the southern courtyard's king's mansion. "Little girl, what is it that makes you so depressed?" Xia Qingqing was startled, but when she saw that it was him, she let out a sigh of relief. She lightly patted her chest and replied, "You scared me. I thought I met some blind playboy again. Look at your frosty face. If any playboy dared to flirt with you, wouldn't he be thrown into the river to feed the fish?" Song Qingshu teased. Xia Qingqing blushed. "Am I that scary?" Song Qingshu smiled. Although Xia Qingqing was gentle and pleasant in front of him, she was still a demoness who killed without blinking an eye. Back then, Governor Ma's son had only flirted with her, and in the end, he lost his life in vain. "Brother Song, I just met with King Xiao. King Xiao knows about my relationship with you and received me warmly. When he heard why I came, he said that this was also the reason he came back to the capital. He will immediately leave to meet the emperor. Unfortunately, Yelu Hongji has already made up his mind to kill them. What should we do now?" Xia Qingqing said with a face full of worry. In her view, even the great king of the southern courtyard would not be able to save them. Unless there was a miracle, Yuan Qingji and the others were dead. "I already know the latest developments. Don't worry, I have other ways to save them." Song Qingshu comforted her. Xia Qingqing's eyes lit up. "What way?" "It's not time to tell you yet. You will naturally know when the time comes." Because Zhao Min had not succeeded in persuading Yelu Qi to surrender, Song Qingshu did not dare to make any promises. He did not want Xia Qingqing to be disappointed the more hopeful she was. After the two returned to the base of the laundry yard, Song Qingshu ordered the spies of the laundry yard to find a topographic map of the vicinity of Shanjing. Because this was a military secret, it was impossible to have a complete map. He could only look at the map while asking the spies who had been lurking in Shanjing for many years for relevant information. He sketched a rough sketch in his mind. Xia Qingqing and Icy Snow also helped him organize the information of the passes and cities along the way to the Golden Snake Camp. Unknowingly, several hours had passed. Suddenly, someone outside sent a message. After reading the note, Song Qingshu's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. He got up and said to the two women, "Wait for me here. I'll go out for a while." Then, he changed his clothes and asked along the way until he came to an extremely lively courtyard. Looking at the three words "Red Leaning House" on the signboard, the women standing at the door, and the thick smell of cosmetics in the air, how could he not know where this place was? Song Qingshu walked in with a strange expression on his face and found the private room indicated on the note. He pushed the door open and saw Zhao Min, who was dressed as a man, drinking while leisurely listening to a courtesan play the zither. Song Qingshu coughed to show his arrival. "You seem to be living a leisurely life." Although he was a famous handsome man in the Wuling world, and in his early years, he was also known as the Jade-Faced Meng Chong, but he had to admit that Zhao Min's beauty in men's clothing was far superior to his. He could only comfort himself with illusory things like manliness. Zhao Min waved her hand and gestured for the courtesan to leave. Then, she sighed, the most popular courtesan of the largest brothel in the capital, but her Guqin skills are only so-so. It's obvious that Liao is really declining. Visiting a brothel has developed the sentiment of worrying about the country and the people. Song Qing-shu had a strange expression on his face. But this girl's Guqin skills are indeed far inferior to the princess. After a pause, he said playfully, "If the princess goes to the sea, I guarantee that she will become the world's #1 courtesan." Zhao Min rolled her eyes at him but did not get angry. "Unfortunately, you will never see that day." Song Qing-shu also realized that this joke was a little cold, so he could only change the topic. "By the way, how did you know I was there?" He couldn't help but be alert. After all, he was in the secret stronghold of the laundry brothel. But Zhao Min still managed to find him. Zhao Min said lightly, "With your influence in the Jin Kingdom, you are most likely in the laundry brothel. And I roughly know the locations of the laundry brothel's secret strongholds in Shangjing. At most, I will send people to each location, and one of them will definitely find you." Song Qing-shu's brows furrowed. A secret agency was actually known by another secret agency like the back of their hands. How scary was that? It looked like the political turmoil this year had caused the cleaning house's military affairs to be lax. Wang Yinping's main focus was still on the country, helping her sister go by. She had neglected the management of the other country's bases. "The reason why I asked you to come this time is because Yeluqi needs to see you before he can be at ease." Just as Zhao Min finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. "Speak of the devil, and he will appear." Zhao Min laughed lightly and signaled for her subordinates to open the door. Very quickly, two people wrapped in cloaks walked in. After closing the door, they took off their cloaks and revealed their true appearances. One of them was naturally Yeluqi with an imposing appearance. The other was an old man with white hair and beard. The most eye-catching feature was the heavy bags under his eyes. However, Song Qing-shu would not treat him as an ordinary old man because, according to the information he had, he could roughly guess that he was Yeluqi's father, Yeluchukai. When he saw Song Qing-shu, Yeluqi couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Previously, when the princess said that the king of Qi was in Shangjing, I didn't really believe it. You really managed to fool everyone in Shangjing." Chapter 1524. Song Qing-shu stood up to greet him. "My identity is a bit sensitive. I have to be careful." "That's true." Yeluqi smiled, moving to the side to introduce the old man. "This is my father. I've long heard of Mister's great name. My apologies for not recognizing you." Song Qing-shu was not being polite. It must be known that Yeluchukai was the most famous official in history. Many of the Yuan dynasty systems were created by him. The Mongols immediately conquered the world, and later on, they were able to sit peacefully under him. Yeluchukai had a lot of credit. Although Yeluqi was also a rare talent, but if one really wanted to compare, 10 Yeluqis could not compare to one Yeluchukai. Feeling the eagerness in his eyes, Yeluchukai felt somewhat flattered. "Prince Qi is really flattering. These past few years, Prince Qi's name has been like thunder piercing the ears." In this world, Liao had not yet perished. Yeluchukai and the others had not yet arrived in Mongolia. Naturally, there would not be a plot in The Return of the Condor Heroes, where he was forced to go south to join the Song dynasty because of the emperor's persecution. Relatively speaking, Yeluchukai had not even shone brightly on the stage of history. Purely in terms of reputation, he was indeed far behind Song Qing-shu. However, Song Qing-shu was a person who had transmigrated and knew Yeluchucai's ability. Just like playing the Three Kingdoms series, at the beginning when Sun Yu, Zhuge Liang, and the others had not yet become famous, the feeling of winning the lottery was naturally indescribable. Because of Song Qing-shu's enthusiasm, the atmosphere between the two sides was very good. After a period of greeting, Yeluchukai finally spoke of the purpose of this time's visit. "Princess has already told us about the relevant matters. After our family has discussed, we only want to confirm one of the conditions with Prince Qi. As long as Prince Qi can agree to this condition, we will immediately bring our family members east to join the Golden Snake Camp." "What condition?" Song Qing-shu looked at Zhao Min suspiciously. Why did she not inform him beforehand? Zhao Min raised her wine cup and took a sip, showing no intention of answering, instead looking like she was watching a good show. Yalu Chukai then unhurriedly said, Cher also has a younger sister named Yen. Although she's not a beauty that can cause the downfall of a city or state, she is still pretty. As long as Prince Qi agrees to marry her, our family will completely rely on Golden Snake Camp. He had been in Liao for so many years. Naturally, he had his own informants, already knowing that Yelu Hongji wanted to kill them. If it were any other crime, it would be fine. The family would just reluctantly abandon Yelu Qi, but this time Yelu Chukai was framed, and it also involved one, having an affair with another. The Qingshu's family, Yelu Chukai said yin chikama to say chai, yin, but this was related to the fate of the family. Yelu Chukai did not dare to be careless. He did not dare to casually put his future on an illusory promise. If in the future song, Qingshu did not treat them with courtesy, or after crossing the river, it would be too late for regrets. But if the other party married his daughter, then it would be different. The two sides would become a community of interests. He would not have to worry about being neglected, nor would he have to worry about being schemed against. At the same time, he was more confident that he could convince some of the hesitant people in the family, after all, to completely betray Liao. Not everyone had the determination. Marriage? Song Qingshu looked at Zhao Min, unhappily thinking that he had unknowingly been sold by her. Zhao Min smiled at him proudly, not showing the slightest apologetic look. Instead, she instigated, Old Mr. Yalu is too modest. Yalu Yin is a famous beauty. Okay. Song Qingshu did not hesitate to agree. After all, for people like him, what was more important was the practical benefits. The other party's appearance was not important. After all, he never lacked beautiful women around him. Of course, with his status, the other party would not bring an ugly girl to marry him. Obviously, Zhao Min was the same kind of person. So, without asking Song Qingshu, she made this agreement for him. It did not even cause any emotional fluctuations. She, who was born in the royal family, was too used to this kind of marriage. Plus, she understood Song Qingshu. She knew he would not refuse. As for Yelu Yin, Song Qingshu only remembered that in the original work, she was a supporting female with a very low sense of existence. He did not even remember whether she married to Wu or Xiao Wu. Unlike Huang Rong and Xiao Long Nu, who filled him with longing and fantasy from the beginning, he could be said to have no feelings for Yelu Yin. If it was only for Yelu Qi, Song Qingshu may not agree to this marriage. Although he did not mind marriage, but he still valued the marriage partner and the power. The previous marriage, one was with the 9th princess to win over the old Ming dynasty troops. Another was with Rin Yingying to join forces with the Sun Moon sect, whose followers were all over the world. Originally, the last marriage was with Li Yuanji to win over Li Kexiu's Jiangnan Green Camp, but unfortunately, Li Kexiu was too greedy, and in the end, she lost her daughter and troops. The current Yelu Yin obviously could not compare with the 9th princess and Rin Yingying. Although Yelu Qi was a rare talent, he could not compare with the power behind Ajio and Yingying. But now, there was Yelu Chukai, who was this era's Wang Zhua talent, such as Zhuge, Sun Yu, and just him alone was enough. But there's one thing I need to say in advance. I have a wife at home. Your daughter, Song Qingshu, was worried that the other did not know in advance. And if he suddenly found out in the future, he would not be able to be in-laws, but would instead become enemies. You don't have to worry about that, Yelu Chukai replied with a smile. The Khans of the grassland have always married several wives. It's normal for a world-famous hero like you to have 3 or 4 wives. Zhao Min also pursed her lips and smiled. Our great Genghis Khan, at the same time, had 4 empresses. As for the other concubines, it is even more uncountable. Song Qingshu was originally a little disappointed. Why did Zhao Min not seem to be jealous at all? But now he completely understood. Growing up in such an environment, her views in this regard were indeed different from ordinary Han women. In fact, in the original work, Zhao Min did not mind Zhang Wuji having 3 or 4 wives at all. For example, she liked Xiao Zhao very much, and even tacitly allowed Zhang Wuji to accept Xiao Zhao. But her attitude toward Zhou Zhuo was completely different. After all, Zhou Zhuo's martial arts, intelligence, and the advantage of being a childhood sweetheart, was enough to threaten her position. It was obvious that the current Yilu Yin and Zhao Min were not at the same level of opponent. She naturally did not mind. After the marriage was settled, the relationship between the two sides was completely pulled closer, and then they began to discuss the next movement back to the east. After all, it was not just one or two people going, but a whole family going. Yilu Qi was, after all, the imperial palace commander, and had military power, in addition to the fact that Yilu Hongji did not take the rumors of rebellion seriously at first, so he was not thrown into the Ili Courtyard's prison, and at the same time, because the time was too short, his official position was not even suspended. This provided the possibility for his family to escape. Of course, this official position only provided the convenience for Yilu Qi to escape Shanjing City. The Imperial Palace Division under the Imperial Palace Commander was the most elite troop of Liao, and also the troops directly loyal to the Emperor, usually under Yilu Qi's command, but knowing that he had committed treason, why would they follow him? Yilu Qi could only mobilize the troops of his family, adding up to about 2,000 to 3,000 people. Thanks to the nomadic Khitans, even the women and children could ride horses and could be converted into soldiers at any time. Otherwise, if it were the big families of the Southern Dynasty, it would be wishful thinking to bring their entire families and escape successfully. The group of people discussed in the room for a few hours and finally decided on the next course of action and the various details. After Yilu Chukai and his son left, Zhao Min also waved to Song Qingshu. "Let's go too. Don't tell me you still can't bear to part with the girls here." Song Qingshu snappily said, "I don't care about these mediocre women." Zhao Min giggled. "The bride I found for you will not be common, right? Don't worry. I will help you get through this. Yilu Yin is indeed a beauty. How are you going to thank me?" Song Qingshu rolled his eyes. "Come to think of it, I still haven't settled the score with you. You got another marriage for no reason. Be careful. The next time you see Zhuruo, she will give you 2 white bone claws. Now that I've learned your traceless sand treading, I'm not afraid of her." Zhao Min raised her chin proudly. "The reason why I arranged this marriage with the Yilu family, other than to give them a reassurance, is mainly because I want to see the surnamed Zhou's face after suffering a loss, but not getting angry." She even laughed happily at the end. Song Qingshu thought it was possible. With Zhuruo's personality, she would most likely not say anything about it on the surface. After all, it would help his great cause. But deep down, she would most likely be depressed to the point of suffering from internal injuries. After all, she was his only wife back then, but in less than 2 years, he had married more and more wives. Do you know that in our hometown, there are a lot of busybodies on the internet who put you and Zhuruo together as a couple, watching you two fall in love and kill each other? Seeing Zhao Min's smug look, Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh. "What do you mean by that?" Zhao Min was taken aback. She prided herself on being smart, but she could clearly understand the other person's words. But when he put them together, she couldn't understand what was going on. It really surprised her. "Nothing." Song Qingshu clearly didn't plan on sharing his transmigration with her. "Let's go. We'll go find Xia Qingqing and the others first. Then we'll go save them together." The meeting time with Yilu Qi and the others was just before dawn. This was the time when people were asleep the most, so it was naturally the best time to escape. Although time was extremely tight, if it was delayed until tomorrow, Yilu Hongji's imperial edict might come down. At that time, Yilu Qi wouldn't have the convenience of having officials stationed in all the palaces, so the chances of success in escaping would be greatly reduced. Not to mention, he was very likely to be directly captured and sent to the Ili Bai courtyard. Only by catching them off guard and taking advantage of the time difference would there be a chance of escape. "Finally willing to take me to see your hidden mistress?" Zhao Min said with a teasing expression. Chapter 1525. Song Qingshu held his breath, but he did not deny it. He smiled awkwardly. "Seems like nothing can hide from your eyes." Zhao Min snorted. "The wife of the former Golden Snake King and Hui Dao's widow. Your taste is comparable to Cao Cao during the Three Kingdoms period." Song Qingshu was not angry at all. "Princess, You really think highly of me to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Wei Wu. What's there to think highly of about a mere Wei Wu? Zhao Min replied calmly. He'll only unify the North in his life. He won't be able to rule the world. Song Qingshu was stunned and could not help but smile bitterly. Princess, you're quite broad-minded. Zhao Min tilted her head and looked at him with a faint smile. Are you satisfied with being Wei Wu? Song Qingshu did not answer and said, Now that the Mongolians are so powerful in the north, I'm afraid I can't be Wei Wu even if I want to. Zhao Min's expression darkened. She knew that the two of them were destined to be enemies in the future. It was just that she would subconsciously ignore this problem every time she thought about it. The two of them had their own thoughts and did not speak along the way. Before they knew it, they arrived at the laundry yard's base. Xia Qingqing and Icy Snow came out to greet him. When they saw Zhao Min, they subconsciously stopped in their tracks. Song Qingshu introduced, This is Xia Qingqing. You've met her before. This is Icy Snow. This is Princess Xiao Min of the Ruyang residence. The three women stared at each other, not knowing how to deal with this situation. Instead, Zhao Min broke the silence first. This time, I'm here to ask you to save Yuan Qingji together. Hearing her talk about business, the awkwardness between the three women eased up a lot. Upon hearing her words, Xia Qingqing looked at Song Qingshu in confusion. Song Qingshu coughed and explained, Didn't I tell you before that there's a way to save Yuan Qingji? Now that we've come up with a plan, we'll take action tonight. In such a hurry? Icy Snow asked in surprise. As the saying goes, speed is the most important in war. Zhao Min gave a brief explanation of what had happened. Song Qingshu, who was listening, was secretly impressed. He knew that he did not have the ability to explain the whole story in such a short amount of time. After hearing Zhao Min's explanation, Xia Qingqing and Icy Snow roughly understood. At the same time, they also felt a lot less alienated. Change your clothes and let's go, Song Qingshu instructed. After all, it was too conspicuous for them to wear white dresses in the middle of the night. Xia Qingqing and Icy Snow didn't have any problems and quickly returned to their rooms to change into their night clothes. On the other hand, Zhao Min stood still. Song Qingshu couldn't help but smile. I'll ask them to lend you a set of clothes. Zhao Min snorted. No need. This set of clothes is enough for me to change my appearance. Song Qingshu scrutinized her. Now that she was disguised as a man, she was indeed a lot less of a target. But you'll be recognized in the crowd at a glance with this white dress with silver embroidery. So what? I've always been such a dazzling existence. Zhao Min raised her chin and couldn't hide her smugness. Stop being so smug. Song Qingshu rolled his eyes at her. Today's operation is extremely dangerous. If you go like this, won't you be a live target at night? Zhao Min was a little indifferent. Don't I have you to protect me? The world-renowned great master Song can't even protect a weak girl like me, right? As she spoke, her upper body leaned forward slightly. Coupled with the elegant fragrance on her body, Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh. You're really good at seducing people, princess. Bah, who seduced you? Zhao Min was a young girl after all. Being teased like this, she couldn't help but blush. Okay, I still have a lot of clothes in my room. You can go change yourself. Song Qingshu was wearing dark clothes today, so he didn't need to change into a nocturnal outfit. Zhao Min was just flustered by his words. When she entered the room, she realized something. She turned around and said warily, You won't peek, will you? Then you wanted to peek? Song Qingshu looked at her playfully. Go away. What responded to him was a slam of the door. Although Ili by Courtyard's prison was heavily guarded, Song Qingshu had brought along all the experts that Yalu Qi had carefully selected. With Song Qingshu leading the way, it could be said that they were like a hot knife cutting through butter. After all, no one expected that anyone in the capital would dare to openly attack the prison of Ili by Courtyard. In addition, Yalu Qi made full use of his identity as the commander of various palaces to frequently mobilize several troops. This caused the city guards and imperial guards of the palace to be on high alert. Even if they received a request for help from Ili by Courtyard, they dared not come out to help. Therefore, Song Qingshu quickly rushed into the prison. Yuan Qingji and the others in the prison were shocked to see them. Xiao Ban had seen Song Qingshu at the Golden Snake Gathering. In addition, he attacked Xia Qingqing and Icy Snow not long ago, so he thought that Song Qingshu was here to avenge his woman. It was not until Song Qingshu sent people to untie their shackles and explain the ins and outs of the matter to them that he gradually came to his senses. When he heard that Song Qingshu wanted to escape with them, Xiao Ban's eyes flickered. However, he was more shrewd after all. Xiao Zhonghui couldn't help but stand up to express her opposition. After all, she sacrificed herself to enter the palace for her family. Now she was even more worried that she would implicate her family if she left. Do you think that if you don't escape, your family will be fine? Zhao Min rudely interrupted her fantasy. Then she told her about the Li courtyard's newly fabricated story about her and Yuan Qingji's adultery, and how they secretly gave birth to Prince Jin. At the same time, she also mentioned that Xiao Ban colluded with Yalu Qi in an attempt to usurp the throne and make Prince Jin the emperor. Hearing this sinister plan, not only Xiao Zhonghui, even Xiao Ban, who had always been sitting on the fishing platform, turned pale with fright. After all, this matter was far beyond his control. In addition, this black pot was too big and too heavy, and the chain of evidence was also closely linked, causing him to be unable to explain himself. Xiao Ban bitterly looked at Yuan Qingji and his daughter, Xiao Zhonghui. He knew that something would happen to them, but he didn't expect it to happen at this critical moment. Although he knew that his daughter was innocent, what would other people think of this matter? If they didn't know about Yuan Qingji's existence, it would be fine. But if they knew, everyone's gossip mentality was enough to fill up countless detailed details in their mind. But if we leave, won't our people? Unlike Xiao Zhonghui's hesitation, Xiao Ban was worthy of being a person who had experienced many big scenes. He quickly analyzed the pros and cons. He knew that staying here was only a dead end. The only thing that worried him was the people in his family. Don't worry, Yalu Chukai has already contacted your people, Song Qingshu replied. This was also the reason why Yalu Qi and the others were willing to take the unnecessary step of breaking into the prison. After all, the Xiao Ban clan was also a force that could not be underestimated. When the time came for them to escape, they would have a reliable fighting force by their side. Originally, Xiao Ban was slightly worried that all of this was a show put up by Song Qingshu. However, when he saw a core member of the Xiao clan in the crowd, he finally dispelled his doubts and agreed to join Song Qingshu's side. But Xiao Zhonghui suddenly shouted, "I won't leave. Little Ao is still in the palace. If I leave, he won't be alive." Just when the two sides were in a deadlock, Zhao Min opened her mouth and said, "Don't worry. I promise that one day, your son will be safely delivered to you." "What makes you promise me?" Xiao Zhonghui angrily said. "Because I am a Mongolian princess, Xiao Min." Zhao Min raised her head and said proudly. Xiao Zhonghui was shocked. She had also heard of Zhao Min's name and knew that she had great power. But this matter concerned her son's life. How could she easily believe it? Just as she was about to say something, Xiao Ban rushed to stop her. "Since the princess has spoken, we can naturally trust you." "Father," Xiao Zhonghui immediately became anxious. Xiao Ban quickly whispered in her ear, "Right now, Yalu Hongji needs to rely on the Mongolians to survive. How can he offend the powerful Ruyang household?" Hearing his explanation, Xiao Zhonghui reluctantly agreed. Then, the group rushed out of Shangjing through the east gate that Yalu Qi had bribed. Yalu Qi had already brought his clan members to wait in the suburbs. After the two sides met up, they did not dare to delay and rushed all the way to the east. On the way, Zhao Min was somewhat disapproving. "If it were me, it would be better to use these thousands of people to attack the palace. As long as it is done properly, it may even change the dynasty, which is much safer than escaping like this." Yalu Qi smiled bitterly and said, "Princess, you may not know, but the reason we have been able to successfully leave so far is because I used my identity as the commander of the Imperial Palace to mobilize a few troops from the Palace Division to delay the Shangjing City Guards and the imperial guards of the palace. However, this was achieved when the information was not smooth at night. After the two sides figure out what is going on in the morning, I am afraid that they will come after us together. The palace division is, after all, loyal to the emperor. If I had ordered them to attack the palace from the beginning, I am afraid that we would not even be able to leave the city. After listening to his explanation, Zhao Min could not help but poke Song Qing-shu, who was beside her. Congratulations on obtaining a rare general talent. She grew up in Mongolia, so it was normal for her to do such actions while riding a horse. Song Qing-shu smiled, but did not say anything. He looked meaningfully at Yelu Chukai, who was not far away. Although Zhao Min was smart, she did not have the ability to predict the future like he did. She did not understand who he really valued. Meanwhile, in the palace, Yelu Hongji's face was dark. No one would be happy to be woken up in the middle of the night from his concubine's bed. Moreover, he knew that there was a mutiny in the capital. He was even more distraught. On one hand, he arranged for the palace division to strictly guard the palace gates, and on the other, he sent people out to find out what was going on. Unfortunately, it was late at night. Not long after the scouts left the palace, they were assassinated by Zhao Min's spies. Yelu Hongji had been on tenterhooks in the palace until daybreak, but he still did not know what had happened. It was not until daybreak when Xiao Feng, Yelu Yi-sin, and the others each brought their own troops to rescue the emperor. Both sides exchanged statements and finally understood what had happened last night. Yelu Hongji was extremely angry. He immediately ordered Xiao Feng to bring 5,000 of the most elite cavalry to chase after the group of traitors. These 2 days, my family is sick and hospitalized. I can only find some free time to write. Please forgive me. I will fill in the missing chapters later. Chapter 1526. Song Qing-shu and Yelu Qi galloped eastward with their men. There were many checkpoints along the way, but Yelu Qi's betrayal was too sudden. Even the people in Shangjing did not expect it, not to mention the other cities further away. In addition, the news did not spread so quickly. The guards still thought that Yelu Qi was the commander of the imperial palace. When they saw him arrive, they were all flattered and welcomed him warmly. Yelu Qi only lied that he had a secret mission assigned by the emperor, but did not stop at all. Most of the guards did not ask much. After all, the rules were one thing and the actual operation was another. Yelu Qi was the commander of the imperial palace division and was the favorite of the emperor. Who would offend him because of a little suspicion? But even so, there were still a few stubborn guards on the way. They insisted that Yelu Qi had to go through the relevant paperwork before they could let him pass. Yelu Qi was not soft on such people. When the other party saw the paperwork, he killed him with a sword and then put the crime of obstructing urgent military affairs on his head, successfully frightening the other soldiers. Seeing all of this, Zhao Min couldn't help but praise. I've heard that Yelu Qi has the air of a modest gentleman. I was worried that he would be indecisive and delay the opportunity, but now it seems that my worries were groundless. Song Qing-shu sighed. This time it concerns the lives of thousands of people in his family. Even a modest gentleman will become iron-blooded. Just like that, the group of people overcame all the obstacles along the way. After daybreak, they had run about 160 miles to the east. Fortunately, they were all cavalry, and Yelu Qi had transferred good horses from all the palaces. Even so, these few hours of running were enough to make the horses tired. While the troops were resting, Song Qing-shu said in a low voice, "We can't go on like this. We are at least 400 kilometers away from the sphere of influence of the Golden Snake Battalion. Considering the necessary rest time midway, it will take at least 2 days. By this time, the people in Shangjing must have reacted and sent elite cavalry to chase us. It is only a matter of time before they catch up with us." In fact, Song Qing-shu did not know much about the speed of marching in ancient times. There were all kinds of traveling hundreds of kilometers in a day in historical records, which seemed to be beyond the limits of physics. But when he came to this world and led the troops through the baptism of war, he had a general understanding of this problem. The most important thing was that the length of a li in ancient times was different from that in modern times. In ancient times, 1 li was more than 300 meters. 3 li was about 1 kilometer in modern times. In ancient times, an infantry that could travel 20 kilometers a day was already considered a top-level army. Cavalry was a little faster, but like the Mongols, who had 1 soldier and 3 horses, they could only travel about 95 kilometers a day. Of course, if they completely abandoned their supplies and desperately marched, regardless of whether it was infantry or cavalry, their speed could be a little faster. But this would not last long. Once they suffered a setback midway, coupled with the loss of supplies, it was easy for the whole army to be wiped out. About 4 hours had passed since they left Shanjing, and they had run more than 50 kilometers. In the eyes of Ye Luqi and Zhao Min, this was already a very fast speed, but Song Qingshu could not help but complain. One had to know that in his previous world, the world record for a marathon was only 2 hours and 20 seconds, which meant that they could run about 21 kilometers per hour. Now, they had run for 4 hours on a good horse, and they had only run about 50 kilometers. It was not even as fast as the people in his previous world. Of course, complaining was one thing, but Song Qingshu also understood that the comparison could not be so simple. After all, the marathon did not have to carry any weight, and the journey was smooth, and there were supplies along the way. On the other hand, the cavalry had to cross mountains and pass through various checkpoints along the way, which took time. More importantly, there were more than 3,000 people in this army, including many women and children. A large army needed to maintain formation at all times, and it was not as convenient and fast as a single person. There was also the marathon. After all, they only had to run about 42 kilometers in total, and they just had to finish it. The cavalry, on the other hand, had to conserve their horses to a certain extent. Otherwise, with the speed of the marathon, it would not take long for the horses to die from exhaustion. We are already mentally prepared for this problem. This time, how many of us can escape will be up to fate. Ye Luqi was in the army, so he was naturally very familiar with the speed of marching. He had already considered this problem before. Song Qingshu frowned and glanced at Zhao Min, seeing that she was not surprised at all. He knew that she was thinking the same way. He could not help but sigh. These people were used to being in positions of power, and they really did not care about human lives. Of course, he was not so saintly as to want to save everyone. However, these people were going to rely on him, and every one of them was an excellent rider. He could use them as seeds to train a large number of excellent knights. If they died on this wild mountain escape, it would be a waste. How about this? We will split into 2 groups, and leave one group as a distraction to cover the retreat of the main army, Song Qingshu suggested. Zhao Min frowned slightly, and Ye Luqi also smiled bitterly. Those who are wise will die, and those who stay behind will not do their best. They will most likely collapse at the first touch, and they might even expose our information. Zhao Min also agreed. Yes, although there may be those who are willing to stay behind to cover the retreat, there are few people after all. If the others are forced, it will be difficult to guarantee the effect. The army often chose suicide squads and tempted people with wealth and official positions. Although it was dangerous, there was still a chance of survival. It was not like now, where those who stayed behind to cover the retreat would definitely die. Faced with the doubts of the two, Song Qingshu smiled and said, "What if we take the lead?" Zhao Min and Ye Luqi were both shocked. "What do you mean?" "We will take the lead to cover the retreat of the main army," Song Qingshu explained. "In this way, those who stay behind with us will not think that they will die." Zhao Min and Ye Luqi nodded inwardly. With them taking the lead, it was a good idea, but there was a big problem. Then will we also fall into a dead end? Song Qingshu shook his head. "Do you think I'm the kind of person who will seek death?" He remembered in his previous life, Taizu's classic crossing of the Red River 4 times. Against the pursuit of hundreds of thousands of enemies, he managed to escape with his life. At that time, their situation was even worse than now. With such a genius example, combined with the complex terrain of the Taiyang Mountains, it was not impossible to shake off the pursuers. Hearing his general explanation, Zhao Min and Ye Luqi were acutely aware of the possibility of success. To the side, Yalu Chukai also sighed with emotion. Everyone says that the Prince of Qi is a famous general that has never been seen before. Before, this old man felt that the people were exaggerating. Today, I have seen the Prince of Qi for myself. A young girl in the crowd was also curiously sizing him up. Although the young girl was tall, her face still had a childish look. She was not a stunning beauty, but when she suddenly pursed her lips into a smile, there was a shyness and charm to her. Song Qingshu knew that she was his cheap wife, Yalu Chutsai's daughter, Yalu Yan. He politely nodded and smiled at her. Who knew that Yalu Yan's face would suddenly turn red, and she would turn her face away? Song Qingshu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Although she was born in the grasslands, she was still too young. It was normal for her to be so shy. Noticing that the two of them were exchanging glances, Zhao Min put her hand to her mouth and coughed lightly. Indifferently, she said, "Since that is the case, let's split up." Chapter 1527. Song Qingshu nodded, his gaze scrutinizing the crowd. "Me, Princess, Yalu Qi." When his gaze fell on Xiao Ban, he paused for a moment before adding him to the list. "Let a suicide squad and stay behind to cover the rear." He then called Xia Qingqing and Icy Snow over and said, "Qingqing, Icy Snow, you two and Mr. Jinqing will lead the main force to the east. I'm afraid the cities in the east don't know what happened in Shangjing City yet. With Mr. Jinqing on the way, there shouldn't be a problem passing through." Yalu Chutsai's name was taken from the spring and autumn annals of the Zhou clan. Although Chu was talented, Jin was practical. Hence, his name was Chukai and courtesy named Jinqing. Although he was a descendant of the Liao royal family, Liao had already perished by the time he was born. Hence, he should be considered a Jin citizen. Unfortunately, his talent wasn't used by the Jin Empire. Instead, he became a famous minister in Mongolia. It must be said that his name was really well chosen. Song Qingshu paused for a moment before continuing. "A few hundred li from here is the Pingding province, which is Blackwood Cliffs territory. Now that the Sun Moon God Sect and Golden Serpent Battalion have formed an alliance, take my token and give it to Sect Chief Rin. When the time comes, he will help you return to Golden Serpent Battalion's territory. Next, I'll have to trouble you and Agio to settle down well." Icy Snow shook her head. "No, I'll stay with you. Firstly, I'm not good at dealing with government affairs, so I won't be of much help. Secondly, I still want to seek revenge on Murong Jingwe. I don't want to leave Shangjing City like this." Song Qingshu pondered for a moment. "All right then, you can come with us. I'll return to Shangjing City after this." "Thank you." Icy Snow didn't know that Song Qingshu was also looking for Murong Jingwe. She thought that he was doing this for her, so she couldn't help but burst into tears. Xia Qingqing also hurriedly said, "I want to stay with you too." Song Qingshu smiled and pinched her cheek. "Icy Snow is staying to avenge her husband. Why are you staying? Besides, the other team needs you to lead. Who else can I send other than you to deal with the Golden Snake Battalion and find the Sun Moon Sect?" Xia Qingqing was recognized as one of the most important leaders of the Golden Snake camp. She, along with the Ninth Princess, was regarded as Song Qingshu's right-hand man, whether she was the widow of the former Golden Snake King or Song Qingshu's secret lover. Ren Wuxing had met her before and knew that Ren Yingying was her sister. Ren Wuxing could give her some face. Who knew what the temperamental Ren Wuxing would do if someone else went? Xia Qingqing's face and in. Xia Qingqing, 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 Xia. Qingqing and Qing's was and felt. Qingqing's looked. Qingji's. Fortunately, Yuan Qingji did not have any strange expression. It was clear that he had not recovered his memory. Xia Qingqing breathed a sigh of relief, but she was also secretly angry. What was wrong with her? She had clearly already made up her mind, so why was she still subconsciously looking at him? Song Qingshu guessed her thoughts and comforted her with telepathy. "You're Madame Yuan in the eyes of the world. If you don't have any emotions for him now, I'll think you're a little cold." "Thank you, Brother Song." Xia Qingqing almost burst into tears when she heard his warm and gentle voice. She wiped her tears and raised her voice. "Don't worry. I'll bring them back to the Golden Snake Battalion safely. At this time, she had calmed down. She could distinguish the priorities of the matter. She knew that whether it was the thousands of excellent riders or Yelu Chukai, who was the king's assistant, they were all highly valued by Song Qing-shu. She couldn't let her man's efforts go to waste because of a moment of anger. After arranging everything, when he saw Yuan Qingji and Xiao Zhonghui, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but hesitate. The identities of these two people were sensitive, especially Yuan Qingji. It was not convenient for him to appear in the Golden Snake Battalion. He really didn't know how to deal with them. Noticing his gaze, Yuan Qingji stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Brother, thank you for saving my life. In fact, I've always wanted to take Xiao Zhonghui and fly far away. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do so. I'll take this opportunity to take her overseas. It can also be considered as fulfilling one of my wishes." Song Qing-shu was startled. He wondered if he had recovered his memory. Otherwise, why would he be so sensible and self-exile? But he suddenly remembered that at the end of Sword of Blood, Yuan Qingji was also disheartened and went to a large island near the Henny Kingdom to live in seclusion. Maybe there was a hidden gene in his bones. Even if he had lost his memory, he would still have the same ending. But Xiao Zhonghui hurriedly shook her head. "No, I haven't reunited with Xiao Ao." As he spoke, he looked at Zhao Min, who was next to him. After all, she was the one who had promised to rescue her son. Zhao Min frowned slightly. She naturally understood how sensitive Yuan Qingji's identity was. If he regained his memory or was used by someone with ulterior motives, Golden Serpent Camp would inevitably be in an uproar. Even though Golden Serpent Camp was now completely under Song Qing-shu's control, but with the new and old kings fighting, there would still be turmoil and their strength would more or less be weakened. Originally, it was an excellent solution for Yuan Qingji to go overseas, but Xiao Zhonghui's unwillingness to cooperate could very likely mess things up. Thinking that Yuan Qingji did not hesitate to stay in the palace as a guard for Xiao Zhonghui, Zhao Min couldn't help but secretly despise him. She thought that whether it was before or after losing his memory, he was always so indecisive and led by the nose by women. It was no wonder that both his wife and lover threw themselves into the arms of other men. Perhaps it was because of Zhang Wuji. Zhao Min hated indecisive men. Instead, she somewhat admired Song Qing-shu's shamelessness at times. "Princess, do you have any good ideas?" Song Qing-shu was a little overwhelmed. He had no choice but to seek help from Zhao Min in the current situation. But he didn't know that he was being ridiculed by the other party. "Of course there is a way. But if I help you solve this problem, how will you thank me?" The corners of Zhao Min's mouth were always curved into a faint smile. It added a strange charm to her already peerless beauty. "If worst comes to worst, I'll make a sacrifice and pay with my body," Song Qing-shu said seriously. "Go to hell." Zhao Min kicked him. She was obviously angry, but her peach cheeks were red. All the men around them stared at her. "I'll deal with you later." Zhao Min rolled her eyes at him. Then she walked to the side and pulled Xiao Zhonghui to the side. She whispered, "Miss Xiao, I can naturally protect your son, but I'm more worried about you." "Worried about me?" Xiao Zhonghui was a beautiful woman, but when she stood next to Zhao Min, she paled in comparison. "You and young hero Yuan are clearly in love with each other. Now that you're ready to live in seclusion together, why do you insist on bringing your and Yelu Hongji's son? No matter how magnanimous a man is, when he sees someone else's son every day, he will inevitably think of some scenes of you serving other men in the palace. At first, he may be able to bear it, but after a few years, the rift between the two of you will grow. I don't need to say what will happen, right?" With every sentence that Zhao Min spoke, Xiao Zhonghui's face became paler. In the end, it was even possible to faintly see the fine sweat on her forehead. Just when Zhao Min thought that she had succeeded, Xiao Zhonghui suddenly shook her head firmly. "If Big Brother Yuan dislikes me in the future, I deserve it. I won't have the slightest complaint. But if I don't bring little Ao with me, I will be immersed in pain and regret for the rest of my life. In that state, I'm even more unworthy of Big Brother Yuan." Hearing her answer, Zhao Min was dumbfounded. After all, she was a young girl. She had never been a mother. Naturally, she did not understand how much a mother valued child, so she miscalculated. Chapter 1528. However, if she was stumped by this, she wouldn't be called Zhao Min. When she realized that she had missed this point, she quickly thought of a new countermeasure to make up for it. Miss Xiao, have you ever thought about another problem? If your son follows you to live in seclusion overseas and grows up in the wilderness, how can he grow up like a normal child? Even when he's sick, you can't find a doctor. It wasn't easy for him to grow up safely. If he continues to stay in Shangjing, I can guarantee that he will still be a prince and enjoy everything the royal family has to offer. He will also receive a royal education. It's much better than wandering overseas with you, right? This. Xiao Zhonghui was indeed moved, especially when she thought about her son's health, education, and future. She was even more shaken. But can you really guarantee that Xiao Ao will still stay in the palace? Although she knew she was innocent, this matter had become so big. In addition, her entire family had fled. How could Yilu Hongji tolerate his son? Zhao Min clasped her hands behind her back and said proudly, Liao today is no longer the overlord of the north. It's all because of the Mongolians that we are barely able to preserve our country. As long as I explain it, Yilu Hongji will naturally give me face. Xiao Zhonghui nodded. She knew what she said was the truth. These years, Yilu Hongji had often sighed in the harem. It was clear that he felt helpless about Liao's current situation. Seeing that Zhao Min had convinced Xiao Zhonghui to change her mind, Song Qingshu walked over and gave her a thumbs up. Princess, you are truly amazing. You must be unparalleled in the world when it comes to controlling people's hearts. Humph. Zhao Min raised her head proudly. She was clearly very proud of herself. Song Qingshu then changed the topic. But you're a girl, saying that Yuan Qingji will imagine her under another man in the future. Cough, cough, that's really vicious. Zhao Min's face was light red. She said unhappily, one is marked by the company one keeps. After being with you for so long, even a little white flower will learn bad things. Song Qingshu hadn't expected to shoot himself in the foot. Fortunately, Xia Qingqing was about to leave with her team and bid farewell to him, which resolved his awkwardness. The two of them confided in each other, and Song Qingshu finally asked, Qingqing, are you really not going to acknowledge Yuan Qingji? Xia Qingqing smiled and shook her head. He already has his own happiness now. Why bother him with the past? As the saying goes, it's better to forget each other in Jianghu than to help each other in difficult times. It's good for everyone. Seeing that she had made up her mind, Song Qingshu did not say anything else. After watching her leave with the troops, Song Qingshu gathered Yilu Qi and the others to discuss what to do next. This time, we are indebted to you for saving our lives. We will stay and do our best. Yuan Qingji cupped his hands. Song Qingshu knew that with Yuan Qingji's current martial arts skills, it would be much easier for him to escape with Xiao Zhonghui than with the rest of the troops. Song Qingshu tried to persuade him, but when he saw that Yuan Qingji was determined, he stopped persuading him. After all, it was better to have one more martial arts master by his side than one less. Next, their team cleaned up the hoof prints and other traces left by the troops, led by Xia Qingqing. Then, Song Qingshu prepared to lead the suicide team in another direction to lead the pursuers away. At this time, Yilu Qi stopped him. Now we are facing a very big problem. Yilu Qi's words attracted everyone's attention. We Khitans came from the grasslands. Experienced hunters can analyze the number of enemies and where they are going through the hoof prints. The ones chasing us must be the best of the best. There must be similar talents among them. We left behind too few people. I'm afraid it will be difficult to hide from the other party. If they don't follow us but go after the main force, it will be troublesome. This is a little troublesome. Song Qingshu frowned. After all, he was not a native of this world, nor had he grown up on the grasslands. He naturally had not thought of these details on the battlefield. Fortunately, Zhao Min immediately had an idea. If I remember correctly, there's a military horse farm nearby. If we go and steal some horses, we should be able to bluff our way through. Yilu Qi was surprised. That's right. There's a horse farm nearby. If Princess had not mentioned it, I would not have thought of it. Song Qingshu glanced at Zhao Min with some fear. It must be known that although a country's horse farm was not an absolute secret, it was still a military secret. For her to know it like the back of her hand, one could imagine how pervasive her intelligence network was. How much does she know about me? Since they had decided on a target, the group rushed toward the nearby pasture without stopping. On the way, Song Qingshu suddenly remembered something. Urging his horse to Xiao Ban's side, he said, "Hero Xiao, no, I should address your excellency as imperial father-in-law." Xiao Ban smiled bitterly and said, "I have already become a stray dog. King Qi should not make fun of this old man." Song Qingshu smiled. Life was unpredictable. A moment ago, he was high and mighty, but now he was fleeing in panic. "There is something I have always wanted to ask you." Xiao Ban sighed. "I have been waiting for King Qi to come and denounce me." The reason why he dared to attack Xia, Qingqing, and Icy Snow was because he thought that Song Qingshu would not be able to reach them. But now that Song Qingshu was in Shangjing, he must have known about the attack. "There is no need to denounce me," Song Qingshu replied indifferently. "But shouldn't Hero Xiao tell me why you attacked her?" Icy Snow looked at him curiously. After all, they had no enmity and did not know why he attacked her. Xiao Ban hesitated for a long time and finally sighed. "Forget it. Now that we have escaped Shangjing, our decades of hard work are destined to be in vain. There is no harm in telling King Qi." Xiao Ban paused for a moment before saying, "The reason why I attacked her was mainly for the Mandarin duck saber in her hand." Mandarin duck saber? Not to mention Song Qingshu. Even Icy Snow was confused. She said blankly, "I don't have a Mandarin duck saber. It is the cold moon saber that my late husband left behind." Xiao Ban's tone was calm, but his words were earth-shattering. "The cold moon saber is the Mandarin duck saber. Not many people in the world have seen the true appearance of the Mandarin duck saber, but I know that the Mandarin duck saber is not one saber, but two sabers, one male and one female. The cold moon saber is the male saber." Song Qingshu and Icy Snow looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Although they had vaguely guessed that it was related to the Mandarin duck saber, they did not expect the cold moon saber to be one of the Mandarin duck sabers. What the hell is going on? Even Zhao Min's interest was piqued. After coming to Shangjing, she had received information about the Mandarin duck saber. Unfortunately, it was too messy, and the Mandarin duck saber was incomparably mysterious. Even she could not analyze anything. Xiao Ban raised his head and looked into the distance. When he saw Yuan Qingji and Xiao Zhonghui chatting intimately at the back of the group, he called Song Qingshu and the others to the side and slowly recounted a past event. Hundreds of years ago, the Ming dynasty had 3 treasures. The first was the sacred flame insignia, which was known to be able to command the heroes of the Ming dynasty. The second was the heaven and earth great shift, which had the ability to connect the heavens and the earth. Usually, only the sect master could practice it. The third was the Mandarin duck saber. Chapter 1529. The Mandarin duck saber is from the Ming dynasty? This time, it was Song Qingshu's turn to be shocked. It seemed that the Ming dynasty in the Golden Book world had a long history. In terms of heritage, even the Wu-Tang clan could not compare to it. Only Shaolin could compare. That's right. Xiao Ban nodded. I learned about it by chance. It is said that the Mandarin duck saber is the first of the 3 treasures of the Ming dynasty. Unfortunately, it is only a legend. No one knows how powerful the Mandarin duck saber is. Song Qingshu was a little moved. One should know that the sacred flame token was a symbol of power. It was also engraved with the profound martial arts of the Persian Ming dynasty. The heaven and earth great shift was the treasure of the sect. For hundreds of years, the master of the Ming dynasty had relied on this martial art to gain a reputation in the martial world. How could the Mandarin duck saber be ranked above the 2? Since it is the treasure of the Ming dynasty, why don't we just capture a few high-level members of the Ming dynasty and interrogate them? Zhao Min, who was standing at the side, asked curiously. Although the people of the Ming cult were demons who struck terror in the hearts of the people of Jianghu, they were not a threat to her. After all, she had captured those people countless times. Xiao Ban shook his head. According to the results of my investigation, the Ming dynasty lost the Mandarin duck saber 100 years ago. It is said that the secret of the Mandarin duck saber can only be revealed when the two sabers are combined. Therefore, even the people of the Ming dynasty did not know the secret. No matter how powerful you are, you can't defeat time. I see Snow sighed faintly. Obviously, she was thinking of her late husband. Song Qing-shu held her hand to comfort her. He continued to listen to Xiao Ban. I learned this secret by chance decades ago, so I've been looking for the Mandarin duck saber. Heaven rewards those who wait. I finally found the whereabouts of the missing Mandarin duck saber. Oh, although he now knew that the cold moon saber was the Mandarin duck saber, Song Qing-shu was still curious about what happened back then. Xiao Ban explained, the Mandarin duck saber passed through many hands and ended up in the hands of Yuan Chenghuan. Yuan Chenghuan? Song Qing-shu subconsciously glanced at Yuan Qingji in the distance and asked curiously, how did it end up in his hands? Xiao Ban shook his head and said, I'm not sure about that. Back then, Yuan Chenghuan was suppressing bandits everywhere. Furthermore, he held a high position and authority. He had many chances to obtain this saber. And then, Song Qing-shu thought about it and agreed. The Mandarin duck saber might have fallen into the hands of some rich family, and then it was robbed by bandits. Finally, it was destroyed by Yuan Chenghuan, so it was not strange for it to fall into his hands. Yuan Chenghuan obviously didn't know that it was the Mandarin duck saber. I hurriedly rushed over and wanted to get my hands on it. Unfortunately, when I arrived in Beijing, I happened to see Yuan Chenghuan being executed by 1,000 cuts. Speaking of this past, Xiao Ban also sighed. Although I didn't have any friendship with Yuan Chenghuan, I admired him as a hero. Unfortunately, I couldn't save him. The only thing I could do was save his orphan and not let him die. Of course, Xiao Ban laughed self-deprecatingly. I also thought that his son might know where the Mandarin duck saber was. Unfortunately, Yuan Qingji was still young at that time and knew nothing about it. Xiao Ban sighed. Left with no choice, I fled with Yuan Qingji. When I passed by Mount Hua, I handed him over to the famous divine, sword immortal ape Mu Renqing to raise. Mu Renqing remembered my loyalty and specially passed the art of the primordial chaos to me. Song Qing-shu's eyes moved. He had always been curious about how Xiao Ban knew the art of the primordial chaos of the Mount Hua sect. Only now did he know the cause and effect. After leaving Mount Hua, I returned to Beijing and found out that Yuan Chenghuan's house had been confiscated. The Mandarin duck saber had also fallen into the palace treasury. I wanted to enter the palace to steal it, but I ended up running into a terrifying old eunuch. Xiao Ban still felt some lingering fear when he spoke of the past. That eunuch's martial arts were so high that I've never seen anything like it in my life. Fortunately, he didn't seem to have any interest in leaving the inner palace, so I barely managed to escape with my life. Song Qing-shu immediately understood that Xiao Ban had most likely run into Patriarch Sunflower. That fellow always hid in the palace and used the qi of the emperor to cultivate. Naturally, he couldn't be bothered to move much. Song Qing-shu wondered how Patriarch Sunflower was doing in the Manqing dragon vein on Mount Deer Cauldron. His cultivation must be even more terrifying now. Thinking of this, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but feel a little gloomy. Ever since he achieved great success in his martial arts, he was even confident in facing off against the sweeper monk and Huang Chang. However, he wasn't confident in facing Patriarch Sunflower. After all, his cultivation method of absorbing the qi of the true dragon was too strange, even somewhat beyond the scope of martial arts. Fortunately, he didn't have to consider Patriarch Sunflower's threat for the time being. Song Qing-shu continued listening to Xiao Ban. After escaping from the palace, I originally didn't dare to have any ideas about the Mandarin duck saber. However, not long after, the roaming king invaded Beijing. The Ming dynasty fell, and the Mandarin duck saber fell into the hands of the roaming king. Li Chuang bestowed it to the head of his 4 imperial bodyguards, Flying Fox. Ah, Icy Snow cried out in surprise. Flying Fox was her father-in-law. At this moment, she finally understood why the coal moon saber was called the Mandarin duck saber. I secretly went to look for Flying Fox in an attempt to steal the saber, Xiao Ban continued. Unfortunately, Flying Fox's saber technique was exceptionally brilliant. On top of that, he was the head of the roaming king's imperial bodyguards and had many helpers by his side. I wasn't a match for him, so I had no choice but to give up. I planned to cultivate the art of the immemorial before going to look for him. Who knew that after I cultivated the art of the immemorial, I would discover that the roaming king, who had a great reputation, had been eliminated by the Manchurian Qing, and Flying Fox was nowhere to be found. I searched for a long time, but to no avail. I had no choice but to give up. Xiao Ban sighed. Clearly, he was still brooding over this. He pointed at Icy Snow and said, "Not long ago, I received news by chance that the saber in her hand was the Mandarin duck saber that Flying Fox used to possess. That was why I tried to steal it. Unfortunately, I failed at the last moment." Song Qingshu frowned. Previously, he thought that it was only the cold moon saber, so he didn't pay much attention to it. Now that he found out that it was the Mandarin duck saber, it shouldn't be a coincidence that it disappeared from the prison storeroom. What happened to the other Mandarin duck saber? Zhao Hemin suddenly asked. Xiao Ban glanced at Song Qingshu. Seeing that Song Qingshu didn't try to avoid suspicion, he said, "The Mandarin duck saber has been kept in the hands of the Ming dynasty." Unfortunately, the people of the Ming dynasty didn't know its secret. Gradually, the Mandarin duck saber turned from a sacred object to an ordinary saber. Even so, the Ming dynasty was full of experts. I couldn't steal the saber. Later, Fong La rebelled. The Song court sent Huang Chong to lead an army to annihilate him. After Fong La died, the Mandarin duck saber fell into the hands of Prime Minister Zhong. Prime Minister Zhong led the remnants of the Ming dynasty to flee to the west to the Dongting Lake, where they gradually gained a foothold. Prime Minister Zhong was eager to take revenge. When he practiced the heaven and earth great shift, he went mad and was killed by the Song general Kong Yanzhou. The Mandarin duck saber fell into the hands of the next cult leader, Yang Yao. Yang Yao was much more powerful than Prime Minister Zhong. Under his management, the Ming dynasty gradually regained its former glory. Unfortunately, they soon met the god of war, Yu Fei. Xiao Ban's tone was full of sorrow. Obviously, he admired Yang Yao very much. I knew that Yang Yao would lose, so I hurried to the south to see if I could take advantage of the chaos to get the Mandarin duck saber. Unfortunately, Yu Fei was too powerful. In a short time, he collapsed the huge Ming dynasty. When I arrived, I only had time to save Yang Yao's pregnant wife. Unfortunately, Madame Yang didn't know about the Mandarin duck saber. I guessed that it had fallen into Yu Fei's hands. Although Yu Fei's power shook the world, I couldn't resist the temptation of the Mandarin duck saber. I still tried to snatch the saber from him. Who knew that he had a mysterious white-clothed woman by his side? Xiao Ban was filled with emotion. That woman was simply the most beautiful woman in the world. She was more beautiful than any woman I've seen in my life. However, I never expected that such a delicate and weak beauty was actually a top martial arts expert. I was not her match and could only escape with injuries. However, that woman Qin Gong was really too high. She quickly caught up with me. Originally, when I thought that I was going to die, she saw Madame Yang by my side and thought that she was my wife. Seeing that she was pregnant, her heart was moved and she let us go. Song Qingshu's heart moved. Listening to his description and connecting it to the information he had previously obtained, the white-clothed woman he spoke of was most likely Xiao Longnu's mother, Li Songhai. She was Li Qiushui's younger sister and was proficient in the martial arts of the Xiaoyao sect. Xiao Ban was naturally not her match. Because of Madame Yang, she saved my life. In addition, I saw that she was alone and had no one to rely on. I couldn't bear to leave her alone, so I saved her and brought her back to Liao. Xiao Ban continued. Song Qingshu had a strange expression on his face. Looking at his expression, he had most likely taken Madame Yang into his room. Not only was she a wife, but she was also a pregnant woman. His taste was even heavier than mine. What about Yang Yao's posthumous child? Zhao Min acutely grasped the key point. Xiao Ban subconsciously glanced at Xiao Zhonghui and sighed faintly. Madame Yang didn't want her to participate in the Jianghu's vendetta anymore, so she didn't tell her about her background. From the moment she was born, I raised her as my own daughter and named her Zhonghe. Note: in the original novel, the Mandarin duck saber was killed by the emperor in the hands of a hero surnamed Yuan and a hero surnamed Yang. Yuan Guannan and Xiao Zhonghui were the children of the two heroes. In the original novel, it was mentioned that Xiao Zhonghui's father was the Sanxiang swordsman, Yang Buochong. The one with the surname Yuan didn't seem to have a name. In this novel, appropriate changes were made to integrate the plots of the various books. I didn't expect there to be such a secret. Song Qing-shu thought to himself that this was even more melodramatic than the 8 o'clock dramas in his previous life. Yuan Qingji and Xiao Zhonghui could be considered to be fated. Both of them were saved by Xiao Ban when they were young. Strange, then why doesn't he know Yuan Qingji? Song Qing-shu's suspicions grew, but he soon understood. After all, Xiao Ban had only seen Yuan Qingji when he was young. Later on, he sent Yuan Qingji to the Mount Hua sect. How could he recognize Yuan Qingji when he was older? Who got the Mandarin duck saber in the end? Zhao Min had no time to care about their love and hate. She was more concerned about the mysterious Mandarin duck saber. Could it have fallen into the hands of Qin Hui? After all, Yu Fei's death at the Pavilion of Disturbance was orchestrated by Qin Hui and Ma Qixing. I don't know. Xiao Ban shook his head. From then on, the Mandarin duck saber disappeared for nearly 20 years. It was only recently that there was news of it again. It seems that it fell into the hands of the Shanin Shun family by chance. The Shanin family named it the deer-cutting saber. They wanted their daughter to bring the deer-cutting saber to the crown prince, who knew that on the way there, they would be robbed and killed. All the guards were killed. Huh? Song Qing-shu immediately reacted. Wasn't Shin Bijuan kidnapped by Xiao Shi-lang? Xiao Shi-lang was also Yelu Isin's subordinate, so the deer cutter was most likely in his hands. Thinking back to the conversation he had eavesdropped on Xiao Shi-lang and his son-in-law, Xiao Xiamu, it seemed that he was the root cause of the turmoil in Shanjing. Could it be that he had some sort of relationship with Murong Jingwei? Chapter 1530. At this time, Zhao Min also looked in Song Qing-shu's direction. Obviously, she had the same idea as Song Qing-shu and also had doubts about Yelu Isin. But now that they were on the way to escape, even if they had doubts, they could not do anything for the time being. Not long after, the group arrived at the horse farm. The guards of the farm were not prepared for the sudden appearance of the people and had no time to organize a resistance. Soon, the farm was occupied by Song Qing-shu and the others. After getting the war horses, Song Qing-shu took the people and the horses back to the place where they had just separated. Fortunately, Yelu Qi and his clansmen were all good at training horses. Otherwise, Song Qing-shu really did not know what to do with so many horses suddenly. Removing the hoofprints left when there were fewer horses, and then leaving the hoofprints left when there were more horses, all the way to the north. Looking at many people in the team with serious faces and eyes full of confusion and fear, Song Qing-shu knew that they could not simply escape like this, or it would be easy for them to be chased to the north. At that time, the morale of the army would be broken and it would become a rout. In his previous life, Taizu was able to lead the army to cross the Qishui River 4 times under the siege of hundreds of thousands of enemies without collapsing because of the implementation of the political commissar system. The army had spiritual beliefs, and the cohesion was far greater than that of ordinary troops. But now, this temporary team obviously did not have that condition. There was no condition to create conditions. It just so happened that the scouts behind found that the vanguard of the pursuing army was approaching. So Song Qing-shu ordered the army to ambush in a valley a few miles away. Hearing that they had to stop, many people in the team did not understand and thought that they should seize the time to escape. But Song Qing-shu was not moved, and anxiety and suspicion gradually spread in the team. Fortunately, the pursuers quickly caught up. It was a 500-man light cavalry unit. After all, it took time for the main force to assemble, so they first sent a small team to chase after them. Their assigned task was to constantly harass and bite Yeluqi's group to slow down and buy time for the main force behind them. They chased all the way for fear of wasting any time, but they did not expect that the hunters would become the prey. When stones and logs fell from the sky, the whole team suffered heavy losses. Following that, Song Qingshu led the cavalry that was lying in ambush and charged down. The pursuers were already terrified, thinking that the 3,000 people who had escaped were all lying in ambush here. None of them had any thoughts of resisting and ran with all their might. In the end, the more they ran, the more chaotic their formation became. There was no way for them to organize an effective counterattack. In less than an hour, the 500 cavalry was completely annihilated. Song Qingshu had Yeluqi gather the horses and arrows of the pursuers and once again set out on the journey north. Previously, Yeluqi and Xiaoban's clansmen were still suspicious of him, but after the battle just now, the group of people looked at him with respect and fear. Just now, there were countless steel swords floating around Song Qingshu, and his whole body was like a meat grinder as he rushed into the enemy camp. Wherever he went, there was no one who could stand up to him. Anyone who saw would be terrified, not to mention the ordinary soldiers. Even Yeluqi and Xiaoban were shocked. Yeluqi was fine, but Xiaoban had once thought of Song Qingshu as an imaginary enemy. He had thought that with his primordial chaos art, even if he couldn't defeat Song Qingshu, he should be able to escape with his life. But after seeing Song Qingshu's attack, he was extremely glad that they had turned from enemies to friends. Even Xiao Zhonghui was dumbfounded. She quietly asked Yuan Qingji beside her, "Is he a human or an immortal?" Yuan Qingji also sighed, half human and half immortal. His tone was full of melancholy. It was obvious that he was also shocked. "You were quite handsome just now." Zhao Min came to Song Qingshu's side and smilingly stretched out a finger to poke him. Song Qingshu lightly replied, "I've actually always been quite handsome." "Shameless." Zhao Min snorted, but the slight smile on her face showed that she was in a good mood. When Xiao Feng led the main force to the place where Song Qingshu had split up, he saw the hoof prints heading north. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. It's understandable that they went east to the south, but why did they go north? Although Xiao Feng looked like a tall and sturdy man, he was actually extremely meticulous. He hadn't been the beggar sect leader for so many years for nothing. Here, he could immediately see that something was wrong. Just as he was about to send people to the east to continue chasing, he suddenly saw a few defeated soldiers fleeing from the north, their faces full of panic. Recognizing their clothing, Xiao Feng hurriedly sent people to capture them. After questioning them, he found out that the vanguard had been ambushed and the enemy was running north. After receiving the confirmed news, Xiao Feng immediately led his troops to chase north. Because of this interruption, he momentarily forgot to send troops to investigate the situation in the east. Otherwise, he would have found a main force by running east for more than 10 miles. For the next few days, Xiao Feng led his troops to chase after them. The more he chased, the more suspicious he became. Why did they run north? A deputy general next to him said, "Could it be that they planned to seek refuge with the Mongolians, so they went all the way north to get out of the fortress through Yinmen Pass?" Xiao Feng's expression changed. Yinmen Pass is the northern barrier of our Great Liao. If it is broken through, the enemy will be able to move south, and the northern side of Shangjing will be defenseless. Another deputy general said, "Yinmen Pass is heavily guarded. I'm afraid that Yeluqi's men won't be able to break through." Xiao Feng shook his head. Under normal circumstances, of course they won't be able to break through. But don't forget that Yeluqi still has the reputation of the imperial palace. Now that this happened so suddenly, the entire country doesn't know what happened in the capital. If he finds a loophole, it'll be over. We've already sent pigeons to various places. Looking at the time, everyone should have received the news by now. the deputy general said hesitantly. Pigeons don't always arrive, Xiao Feng said with a frown. And as far as I know, Yaluchi has tamed a few green sea turtles, which are specially used to hunt enemy pigeons. When the deputy generals heard this, they were all stunned. If the information didn't reach the place, it was possible that Yaluchi would be able to break through. But I'm more curious about why we haven't caught up with them after chasing for so long. Xiao Feng had traveled lightly this time. Other than some dry rations, he didn't bring any other supplies. His supplies were completely provided by the counties along the way. Moreover, he had brought the most elite cavalry. There was no reason that he couldn't catch up with Yaluchi and the others who were dragging their families after so long. I heard that they had plundered a horse farm before. It's probably because they can change horses without stopping, a deputy general replied. Maybe, Xiao Feng frowned slightly. He still had some doubts in his heart. Forget it. Everything will be revealed when the encirclement is formed. Along the way, not only did he chase after them, but he also constantly deployed troops to form an encirclement. He would be able to draw in the net within a day at most. However, just as he had this thought, a horse suddenly came to report that Yaluchi's troops had suddenly turned west in the direction of Ningwu Pass. Ningwu Pass? Are they going to seek refuge with Western Xia? Xiao Feng was a little confused. He really couldn't figure out what Yaluchi and the others were planning. Liao's current territory was roughly the future Shaanxi province and some places in the eastern part of Shaanxi. Shaanxi province was surrounded by the Taiying Mountains to the east, the Luliang Mountains to the west, the Hung Mountains to the north, and the Yellow River to the south. There were a few small basins in the middle, which was a typical example of a place that was easy to defend and difficult to attack. There was Yinmen Pass to the north and Ningwu Pass to the west. They blocked the main traffic routes in the north and west. After passing through Ningwu Pass, they would enter the Lus Plateau, and it wouldn't be long before they reached the Western Xia's sphere of influence. However, it was obvious that Yaluchi's group was closer to Yinmen Pass than Ningwu Pass, so Xiao Feng's previous arrangement had been based on the premise that the other party would go straight to Yinmen Pass. The other party suddenly turned west and instantly got out of the encirclement he had arranged. Xiao Feng had no choice but to turn northwest and chase after them. At the same time, he sent someone to order the previous troops to change direction to the west and to prevent the other party from changing direction again to go north to Yinmen Pass. Meanwhile, Song Qingshu's group was resting at the foot of a mountain. After days of rushing, everyone was exhausted. Even Zhao Min, who had always been delicate and beautiful, had a haggard look on her face at this time. She was no longer as gorgeous as she usually was. Are we really going to take a detour through Western Xia? Yaluchi asked in puzzlement. After all, the road to Ningwu Pass was not a flat plain, and they still needed to cross the Cloud Mountain. Although this could slow down the pursuers, their speed would also be slowed down. Moreover, by the time they arrived at Ningwu Pass, most of the guards there would have already received the news. Their small number of people wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Of course not. We'll turn around and head east, go out of Pingxing Pass, and leave through Flying Fox Star, Song Qingshu replied. My God, Yaluchi exclaimed. At this time, the pursuers are gradually closing in on us. If we turn around and head east, won't we be walking right into a trap? There was a long and narrow corridor from east to west between Mount Hung and Mount Wutai in the northeast of Shaanxi. Going all the way east was Pingxing Pass, which has shown extraordinary splendor during the anti-Japanese war, and further east was Flying Fox Star. Although the Taiying Mountains were a natural moat, there were also 8 exits that were similar to choke points. They were the 8 Xing Xing of the Taiying Mountains. From north to south, they were Jundu Xing, Puyin Xing, Feihu Xing, Jing Xing, Fuka Xing, Baixing, Taiying Xing, and Lianguan Xing. Hearing Yaluchi's exclamation, even Zhao Min felt the same way. Although she was smart and witty, she didn't have enough resources and information. Faced with such a situation, she was helpless. The reason why we went north, west, and east was to mobilize the troops in the northern part of Liao. Otherwise, it would not be so easy for us to pass through the choke points. But now that these garrisons have moved, there will inevitably be a gap. As long as we can seize the gap caused by the poor coordination between the troops, we will be able to escape smoothly, Song Qingshu explained. One had to know that marching and fighting a war was not a simple matter. Even a school organizing a spring outing would have a lot of trouble. With so many troops chasing after them, with the speed of information transmission in ancient times, it was impossible to achieve perfect coordination. There would definitely be a lot of gaps between the troops. One had to know that there were countless times in history when a few troops attacked the enemy. In the end, the other troops were completely annihilated, and the remaining troops did not even know what happened. There will indeed be gaps, but gaps in the battlefield are fleeting. How can it be so easy to coincidentally pass through the gaps between the troops? Yaluchi raised an objection. Although he was young, he was considered a veteran general in the army. All the generals knew this, but it was easier said than done to seize the gaps between the troops. After all, no one could stand from the perspective of God and look at the whole situation. Others may not be able to, but I am an exception, Song Qingshu replied calmly. There was an unparalleled confidence in his tone. Chapter 15:31. Hearing his words, Yaluchi and others subconsciously had some doubts. After all, it was too beyond their military common sense. But on second thought, Song Qingshu had always been a person who created miracles. On the battlefield, he summoned thunder and lightning, and in the linen palace, he went to the sky to pray for rain. Which of these could not be understood by common sense? In addition, they had witnessed him on the battlefield like a demon god, so they all believed him subconsciously. Lend me your Hai Dongxing, and I will use it to transmit information to you. Song Qingshu looked at the handsome Hai Dongxing on Yaluchi's shoulder and could not help but admire it. This thing flew many times faster than pigeons, and it would not be caught by natural enemies on the road like pigeons. In addition, it flew high and fast, and even human archers could hardly hurt it. It was simply the best weapon for information transmission. The only disadvantage was that it could not be cultivated on a large scale like carrier pigeons, but it was just right for special operations. Yaluchi seemed to have guessed his plan. You want to go behind to investigate the information of the pursuers? Yes. Song Qingshu nodded. The marching speed of this world's army was far less than the Qinggong of Jianghu masters. But for most masters, running at full speed for more than 2 hours would be tired and out of breath, unlike the endurance of horses. In addition, cavalry often had several horses that could be changed, so they could gallop at a relatively constant speed. Therefore, in most cases, when martial arts masters raced with cavalry, they would have the upper hand at the beginning, but when their internal energy was exhausted, they would be easily overtaken by the cavalry and would no longer be able to turn the tables. But Song Qingshu was different. At his level of martial arts, his internal energy had long been endless, not to mention that he was best at Qinggong without leaving a trace. It should be known that when Zhou Badong chased Qiu Qianren, he chased him from Jiangnan to the western region, which was more than 10,000 miles. Even the world's most elite cavalry could not march 10,000 miles in a short time. During the period of the Three Kingdoms, Cao Cao sent the tiger and leopard cavalry to pursue Liu Bei on the slopes of Changban. Their march of 300 li in 1 day and 1 night had already shocked the world. Later, with the development of the stirrup, the speed of the cavalry should have greatly increased. However, a march of 10,000 li was still out of reach for the cavalry, but for the top experts in Jianghu, it was achievable. Of course, that was also because both Qiu Qianren and Zhou Badong were top-notch lightness skills experts. One was iron palm drifting on water, and the other was the best of the 5 greats. Even top experts like Reverend Yiding and Hong Qigong wouldn't be able to travel thousands of kilometers in a short time. Song Qingshu's lightness kung fu was still above Qiu Qianren's and Zhou Buotong's. Naturally, he was confident that he would be able to find information about the pursuers ahead of time. No, that's too risky. As the saying goes, a gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall, Zhao Min said worriedly. Song Qingshu smiled and said, "With my martial arts, I'm afraid no one in this world can hurt me." There's no such thing as a wall. Zhao Min was startled. Then she smiled bitterly and said, "That's true. I don't know how you practice your freakish martial arts." Then Song Qingshu said to Yelu, Qi, Zhao Min, and the others, "You guys stay here and build up your strength. Wait for me to send you a message. Then, according to the instructions from above, go through the gaps between the pursuers. Remember, no matter how ridiculous the order is, even if it makes you feel like you're walking into a trap, do it. Don't hesitate, or you'll lose your chance." "Okay, we'll get it." Yelu Qi nodded. Then, Song Qingshu used his lightness skills and flew toward the east. Watching the figure disappear like a wisp of smoke, everyone who had never seen him before opened their eyes wide. Xiao Ban sighed and said, "He's like a reincarnated immortal." Yelu Qi was also impressed and said, "Even the best horse in the army is not as fast as him. I wonder how long he can last at this speed." At this time, Song Qingshu's internal energy was endless. Unless he frequently used the teleportation footwork of so close, yet worlds apart, which consumed a lot of internal energy, his internal energy would not be depleted by using traceless steps in his normal state. He used his lightness skills and flew all the way, thinking, "This time it really took a lot of effort, but I can use this opportunity to turn Liao upside down, so that he can no longer participate in the joint attack against the Jin Kingdom." In addition, the Southern Song Dynasty's envoy was killed by Shui Yi's men. My mission this time is considered to be half completed. The rest is to find the whereabouts of Murong Jingwei. According to the information obtained before, many clues pointed to Yelu Yisin. Most of the things that happened in Shangjing during this time were stirred up by him. Song Qingshu very much suspected that Murong Jingwei was hiding in Yelu Yisin's mansion at this time, but he did not know what identity he was using. In the next few days, Song Qingshu used his top-notch lightness skill to find out the distribution of the troops chasing after them. When there was a gap between the troops, due to the lack of cooperation between them, he would pass the information to Yelu Qi through Hai Dongqing. Yelu Qi would lead his troops like an agile loach, always slipping through the encirclement of the various troops. After a few times, even Xiao Feng began to suspect, is there a spy in the army who is tipping them off? Otherwise, why can they break through the encirclement at the right time, every time? Unfortunately, the investigation he ordered was fruitless. After all, only a few high-ranking officers knew about the battle plan, and these people did not look like they would tip off anyone. After a few more days, the fishermen who had used all their methods were still unable to catch the sly fish. When Xiao Feng and his men chased after them to flying Fox Xing, they just happened to see Yelu Qi and his men enter the northern plains. "Your Majesty, should we continue the chase?" a deputy general asked. Xiao Feng shook his head. "We are already in the territory of the Qin Kingdom. If we recklessly chase after them, it is very easy to start a war between the two countries." The deputy general panicked. "But are we just going to let them go like this? When the time comes and His Majesty investigates." Xiao Feng sighed. "When the time comes, I will bear the responsibility. Let's go back to Shangjing." He had already guessed that the other party had the help of an expert in the army. Although Yelu Qi was a talented general, he definitely would not be able to perform such a series of amazing operations. In fact, from the beginning, Xiao Feng was not very willing to chase after Yelu Qi. After all, in his opinion, there were many suspicious points in the case of Yelu Qi and Xiao Ban's rebellion. Most likely, they were framed. Now that Liao was already weak, this kind of internal strife would only further weaken its strength. Unfortunately, Yelu Hongji was stubborn and did not listen to advice. Xiao Feng was originally considering whether or not to secretly let Yelu Qi go after him after catching up to him, to preserve a bit of strength for Liao. In the future, when the emperor's anger subsided, he could still bring them back. Otherwise, if he directly captured them and brought them back to Shangjing, the furious emperor would most likely kill them. In the future, if he regretted it, Yelu Qi, Xiao Ban, and their clansmen would not be able to come back from the dead. Now that they had successfully escaped, Xiao Feng was surprised but also somewhat gratified. Note, in history, during the last years of Liao, Yelu Yujian was framed for rebellion. In fear, he fled with his trusted subordinates, but in the end, they were still caught up by the pursuing troops. However, the generals of the pursuing troops knew that he was wronged and felt sorry for him. So, after a private discussion, they released Yelu Yujian and went back to report to the emperor that they did not catch up with him. After Song Qing-shu led his people to the territory of Hebei, Yelu Qi still did not relax at all. Now that we have entered the territory of the Qing dynasty, the Lady Zhenren and the Khitans are mortal enemies. If she knows our whereabouts, she will not let us go. If we don't run this way, how can we escape the pursuit of the Liao soldiers? After all, Song Qing-shu was not a god. Although he could use his peerless lightness skill and hide Dongqing to warn them in advance, the fleeting opportunity was not easy to come by as the pursuing troops increased in number and density. They could be wiped out at any time in the hinterland of Liao, so they could only run to unexpected places to have a chance of survival. In the eyes of the pursuing troops of Liao, Yelu Qi and his people should either go north to the Mongolians, west to the western Xia, or southeast to the Golden Snake Camp. As for the Jin Kingdom in the south and the Qing Kingdom in the northeast, they did not pay much attention to them. After all, the two countries were mortal enemies. Even if Yelu Qi wanted to defect, he would not go to these two countries. It was a pity that they did not know the relationship between the Qing dynasty and the Golden Snake Camp, which gave Song Qing-shu a chance to escape with his people. Seeing Yelu Qi's worried face, Song Qing-shu comforted him. Don't worry. The people of Qing Kingdom will not trouble us. He had arranged for Xia Qingqing to lead the troops away first so that he could communicate with Dongfang Muxue. Now that more than 10 days had passed, Dongfang Muxue must have made the proper arrangements. Yelu Qi was very suspicious at first, but under the leadership of Dongfang Muxue for the past 10 days, he had escaped from the pursuit of tens of thousands of pursuing troops of Liao, so he had been convinced. Seeing that Dongfang Muxue was so sure, he believed him completely. Sure enough, for the next few days, they did not run into any traces of the Qing army. He could not help but click his tongue in wonder. Then they found Xia Qingqing and her party waiting for them at the border of Shandong and Hebei. The two sides met up smoothly. Next, I will leave these people to you and Jiao. Make the proper arrangements for them when the time comes. I have to go back to Shangjing City, Song Qing-shu said to Xia Qingqing. Don't worry. Leave it to us. She understood that Song Qing-shu returned to Shangjing City this time to seek revenge on Murong Jingyue for icy snow, so she understood very well. At this time, Yuan Qingji came over with Xiao Zhonghui and said goodbye to Song Qing-shu. This matter is settled. We're going to go out to sea and live in seclusion. Song Qing-shu knew that they could have left a long time ago, but they stayed to help him because they wanted to repay him for saving their lives and because they were worried about their clansmen. Now that they saw that their clansmen had been properly settled, they naturally had to say goodbye. I wish you both happiness and a safe journey. Song Qing-shu did not force them to stay. He smiled and cupped his hands. Looking at the two figures going away, Xia Qingqing seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Finally, we have said goodbye to the past. Song Qing-shu snorted. Don't be so anxious when you see Yuan in danger in the future. Xia Qingqing blushed slightly, gently hugged his arm, and said softly, in the future, I will only be anxious when Song is in danger. Cough cough, at this time, Zhao Min suddenly appeared. Song, we should be on our way. Xia Qingqing did not know if it was a coincidence or if she heard their conversation and deliberately said this. For a moment, she was so scared that she hurriedly let go of Song Qing-shu's hand, blushing. Song Qing-shu winked at her, laughed, and returned to Liao with Xiao Min and icy snow. At this time, in the imperial palace in Shangjing, Yelu Hongji was looking at a secret report with a gloomy face. The report said that Xiao Feng secretly betrayed him, which was why the tens of thousands of troops could not catch a mere 2,000 or 3,000 rebel soldiers. After reading the secret report, Yelu Hongji took the letter to the fire and burned it. Thinking of the scene where Xiao Feng protested for Yelu Qi and Xiao Ban, Yelu Hongji's face was bright and dark under the illumination of the fire. In order to let the readers have an image of the route Song Qing-shu and Yalu Qi took this time to escape, I will write a geographical introduction of this world's Liao in the next few days on my official account. Everyone should understand after looking at the map. Chapter 1532. Meanwhile, Song Qing-shu returned to Shanjing City with Xiao Min and Icy Snow. Due to the previous uproar of the rebellion case, even the air in Shanjing City was filled with a murderous aura. As the two women had already met, Song Qing-shu simply brought Icy Snow to the Ryong Mansion stronghold in Shanjing, Little South Tower. Icy Snow entered the courtyard and quickly noticed the pavilion where Xiao Min often played the guqin. She saw two lines of poetry on the pillars on both sides of the pavilion. The stars are pale and colorless. The jade mirror floats alone in the sky. Song Qing-shu had seen it before, but he didn't pay much attention to it. On the contrary, Icy Snow, who was also a woman, could faintly feel Xiao Min's thoughts. Looking at the graceful handwriting, it was obviously written by a woman. It was most likely written by Xiao Min herself. She didn't expect that the awe-inspiring princess, Xiao Min, would also be filled with weakness and confusion. While she was deep in thought, she heard Song Qing-shu say, "I learned from Yalu Qi that when you and Qingqing were arrested and sent to prison, the relevant items were under the care of the judge of the Imperial Palace, Yalu Yen Ge. Previously, I went to the Imperial Palace deployment courtyard and only found Qingqing's golden snake sword and your silver bell and golden lock. Your cold moon saber is missing. Now that we know the cold moon saber is the Mandarin duck saber, we might be able to find the mastermind by following this clue." That's right, Xiao Min also agreed, and I have a faint feeling that Murong Jingwei is definitely related to this. After all, a person like him definitely can't resist the temptation of the Mandarin duck saber being invincible in the world. Icy Snow had always wanted to find her late husband's relics, so she naturally had no objection. Then, Xiao Min summoned her subordinates to inquire about the magistrate Yalu Yan's residence. However, since the people in Shanjing City had quit smoking several times more than before, they didn't dare to break into the residence of an imperial court official in broad daylight. It just so happened that they had been on the run for some time. Although they had rested on the road for a few days, they were still very tired. So, Xiao Min arranged for them to sleep in their rooms and wait for the sky to turn dark. Nowadays, Song Qing-shu wasn't used to sleeping alone on an empty bed. He originally wanted to share a room with Icy Snow, but after looking at Xiao Min, he didn't bring up such a suicidal idea in the end. At most, I'll just sneak in after you're asleep. Song Qing-shu felt relieved when he thought about it this way. However, he had been racing against time with Liao's cavalrymen with his qinggong. Over 10 days of exhaustion had taken a toll on him. Initially, he planned to get up later and go to the next room, but who knew that he would fall into a deep sleep the moment he collapsed. He only woke up after 2 o'clock at night. Originally, the night was dark and windy, and it was a good time for them to have some fun. Unfortunately, they still had a mission to complete. The residence of a magistrate Yalu Yin wasn't a dangerous place. Song Qing-shu didn't feel any pressure bringing the two women in. In fact, with Icy Snow and Xiao Min's martial arts, as long as they were careful, it wouldn't be a problem for them to enter alone. Soon, the three of them found him in the inner residence. He was fooling around with a beautiful concubine. When Xiao Min and Icy Snow understood what was going on inside, they spat and turned away with blushing faces. Although Song Qing-shu had the intention to watch the show, he couldn't possibly wait outside with the two women until he was done, right? Left with no choice, he barged in. Before the concubine could react, her sleeping acupoint was sealed. As for Yalu Yin, he wasn't so polite and directly threw him to the ground. A moment ago, he was at the top of the clouds, and the next moment he was thrown to the ground. Any man would be furious, not to mention that Yalu Yin was an official of the imperial court. However, as soon as he opened his mouth to curse, Song Qing-shu kicked him so hard that he almost couldn't breathe. He immediately became as quiet as a cicada in winter. However, when Xiao Min and Icy Snow came in, his eyes immediately widened. He had never seen such beautiful women. His concubines were considered pretty, but compared to the two women in front of him, they were like pheasants and phoenixes. Why is the cold moon saber missing? Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh. It was indeed a man's instinct to be lustful. He was already in such a predicament, yet he still had the mood to look at beautiful women. Cold moon saber? Yilu Yin couldn't react for a moment. Zhao Min was already somewhat unhappy with his gaze, especially when he was naked and looked as wretched as one could imagine. Seeing him still foolishly staring at her, she was even angrier. She kicked his face and sternly said, "I'm asking you a question." Yilu Yin realized that although the woman in front of him was beautiful, she was also very dangerous. He hurriedly replied, "What cold moon saber? I don't know what you're talking about. I have many ways to make you speak the truth. Believe me, you definitely don't want to try." Faced with such a situation, Zhao Min was already used to it. Song Qingshu replied indifferently, "There's no need to go through so much trouble." So he directly used the soul-shifting technique. As expected, Yilu Yan's expression became stiff, and he answered every question. After listening to his confession, Song Qingshu knocked him out with a punch. When he woke up tomorrow, he would only think that he had a nightmare and wouldn't remember what happened in the middle of the night. Someone from the Wei Palace took it away. Thinking about the information he just received, Song Qingshu's brows furrowed even tighter. Yilu Yisin again. Do you still remember the conversation we overheard between him and the son-in-law, Xiao Shimao? When Fei's fall from grace and Yilu Qizhao's half-betrayal were most likely his handiwork, Zhao Min said, "Looks like it's time for us to investigate this Yilu Yisin." Song Qingshu frowned, "But I've infiltrated the Wei Palace several times before, and I didn't find anything out of the ordinary. I also couldn't find any trace of Murong Jinghua. Don't tell me you're soft-hearted because he's the father of your little lover." Zhao Min teased. "How is that possible? I really didn't find anything out of the ordinary in the Wei Palace." Song Qingshu explained. However, when he thought of Yilu Nanxian, he couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive. Could it really be like those melodramatic dramas in his previous life? Her father would be the villain, and he would be the enemy who killed her father, blah blah. Of course, it's hard to find anything just by looking at the flowers on horseback. If you want to find anything, you have to live in the Wei Palace for a while. Zhao Min said thoughtfully. Song Qingshu was startled. "You can't really think of me as a god, right? The Wei Palace is not like Yilu Yin Ji's Judge Palace. I can infiltrate it for a short period of time, but to live there for a long time and become a guard of the Wei Palace, is that for nothing? Of course, I'm not asking you to go with your current identity, but to disguise yourself." Zhao Min rolled her eyes at him. Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. "How do you want me to disguise myself? Let me prepare first. I'll tell you when the time comes." At this time, the three of them had already returned to the little southern inn. Zhao Min left in a hurry to gather her subordinates to discuss something. "Qingshu, your relationship with this princess is quite good. I see Snow, who had been quiet all this while, said with a faint smile. She's both an enemy and a friend." Song Qingshu didn't know how to describe the relationship between him and Zhao Min. It was closer than ordinary friends, but also a little less than a couple. Although this princess looks strong on the outside, there's a hint of softness in her bones. "I see Snow," said as her gaze fell on the two lines of the poem on the pavilion. The stars were pale and colorless, and the jade mirror floated in the air. Song Qingshu didn't pay much attention to it before, but now that she reminded him, he realized that there was an indescribable loneliness in the depths of Zhao Min's heart. For Zhang Wuji? Song Qingshu pondered. Back then, Zhao Min abandoned everything for Zhang Wuji. She didn't even hesitate to betray her country and people. But in the end, she didn't succeed. Zhang Wuji was actually possessed by venerated Ming. Left with no choice, she could only return to Mongolia and borrow the power of the Riyang residents to avenge her lover. But in the eyes of outsiders, she was abandoned, and it was because love turned into hatred that she went against the Ming dynasty. Although they hadn't heard of it, it was obvious how much slander and pressure she had endured in the Mongolian aristocratic circle. For a person like Zhao Min, this wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that her lover, whom she had pledged her undying love for, was already separated from her. This was the biggest blow to her. She still maintains the radiant image of Princess Zhao Min. I'm afraid that she often feels sorry for herself in the dead of night. Song Qing-shu suddenly felt that he didn't care much about her spiritual world. After talking about Zhao Min's matters, Icy Snow and Song Qing-shu looked at each other and suddenly felt a little awkward. In fact, their relationship didn't need to be like this. But now that they were in Zhao Min's territory, she felt very awkward. After all, she was still a widow, and she couldn't let it go in front of outsiders. Song Qing-shu had roughly guessed her concerns, so he did not press her further. He just chatted with her about some things that had happened over the years. After all, the two of them had been separated for many years, and too many things had happened during this period that were worth talking about. Just like that, they chatted for more than 2 hours. The sky was getting darker. Although they had just taken a nap, it was apparent that it was time for them to sleep again. Song Qing-shu whispered a few words into Icy Snow's ear, and her snow-white skin flushed instantly. She shook her head like a rattle drum and hurriedly ran back to her room, locking the door with a loud bang. Song Qing-shu was left alone with a bitter smile on his face. Why did he always encounter this kind of predicament where 3 monks have no water to eat? The next morning, Song Qing-shu was woken up by Zhao Min. She said excitedly, "There's a good opportunity now. Yelu Yisin is recruiting a Han musician." Song Qing-shu saw that her eyes were red, and there was a trace of exhaustion on her bright face. Obviously, she had worked all night last night. He felt pity and puzzled. Recruiting a musician? What kind of opportunity is this? Have you forgotten that we overheard the conversation between Yelu Yisin and Xiao Xiaomao? Zhao Min rolled her eyes. Xiao Xiaomao framed Yelu Qi and the others. Now that Yelu Qi and the others have defected, Yelu Hongji may vent his anger on Xiao Xiaomao. In order to protect Xiao Xiaomao, Yelu Yisin must speed up the implementation of the honey trap. This time, King Wei's mansion specially recruited a Han musician, most likely for that poor crown princess of the Southern Song dynasty. Shen Bijuan? Song Qing-shu couldn't help but be startled when he thought of the beautiful and gentle woman he saw that night. Previously, when my family was hospitalized, I will update a little every day. I hope you don't mind. Chapter 1533. But Shen Bijuan is the eldest miss of the Shun family and comes from a scholarly family. She is also the candidate for the crown princess. She must be skilled in the 4 arts. Why would she need a zither master to teach her? Song Qing-shu suddenly found it strange. I'm not too sure. Zhao Min frowned. Perhaps Shen Bijuan needs some accompaniment when she enters the palace. Song Qing-shu nodded. There were dowries in this world. Not only were there maids, but there were also other talented people. Does Princess plan to apply for a Han zither master? Song Qing-shu teased. With Zhao Min's skills, she was more than qualified to apply for a zither master. Zhao Min's lips curled up, and she said lightly, "It's not me, it's you. I'll go." Song Qing-shu was dumbfounded. I can't even differentiate between Gong, Shang, Jiao Zheng, and you. How can I be a zither master? What does that matter? Zhao Min was unconcerned. Won't you learn it if I teach you? Forget it. I think it's better if you go by yourself. In his previous life, he was a musical idiot. Song Qing-shu felt a headache just thinking about playing the zither. Wei Wangfu is filled with danger. Murong Jingyue might be hiding inside. Are you really that heartless to let a weak girl like me take such a risk? Zhao Min looked at him pitifully. In order to make it more convincing, she purposely teared up. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but admire Zhao Min's acting skills. Compared to some of the actresses in his previous life who had to use eye drops to cry, Zhao Min's tears flowed freely. Her acting skills were many times better. However, even though he knew that she was acting, Song Qing-shu was still worried about Zhao Min entering the Wei Wangfu. She was known as the #1 beauty in Mongolia, and he knew very well how beautiful she was. If something were to happen to her in the Wei Wangfu, he would regret it for the rest of his life. But since King Wei's residence is recruiting, it shouldn't take long. How can I learn it so easily? Song Qingshu reckoned that even if he was not a master like Chu Yang and Lu Zhengfeng, he should at least be very skilled in the zither. How could a beginner like him be qualified to enter? Isn't first young Master Song known as a martial arts prodigy who can learn any martial arts at a glance? Zhao Min snorted. Not to mention, there's a great teacher like me to guide you. I guarantee that you'll finish your apprenticeship within 3 days. 3 days? Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. He wasn't as confident as Zhao Min. But now that things had come to this, they could only bite the bullet. Next, Zhao Min led Song Qingshu to her room, took out a jiaodong zither, and softly said the 12 melodies are Huangzhong, Delu, Taizun, Jiazhong, Gushi Zhonglu, Laobin, Linzhong, Izei, Nenlu, Wuxi, and Yingzhong. This has existed since ancient times. It's said that the Yellow Emperor ordered Ling Luan to be the rhythm. Hearing the cry of the phoenix, he created the 12 melodies. The 7 strings of the zither are gong, shang, jiao, wei, and yu. The first string is the huangzhong, and the third string is the gong tune. The 5 tunes are slow jiao, qing shang, gong tune, slow gong, and laobin tune. She explained in detail. Although Song Qingshu knew nothing about music, he was smart and could understand it easily. Zhao Min liked it very much. She immediately taught him the finger technique and taught him to play the extremely short song of the Jade Firmament. Song Qingshu learned it a few times. When he played it, although the notes were not correct and the finger technique was not smooth, it was still elegant. It was like a clear blue sky with no clouds in 10,000 li. When the song ended, Zhao Min couldn't help but praise. In the way of the zither, finger technique is after all a small skill. What's more important is the mind of the zither player. You are magnanimous and have lofty ambitions. Although your technique is not smooth, you can still restore the meaning of the zither. The prefectural bishop is still the best, Song Qingshu said with a smile. When learning the zither, the two of them would not be too far apart. Smelling the elegant fragrance coming from Zhao Min, he felt relaxed and happy. Young Master Song has a sweet mouth. Zhao Min pursed her lips and smiled. But flattery is useless. I teach people very strictly. As she spoke, she waved the bamboo whip in her hand, as if she would hit him if he did not learn well. Song Qingshu laughed bitterly. He could only continue to seriously memorize the rhythm and figure out the finger technique. Fortunately, he had a very good memory, and coupled with his extremely strong mental strength, he was able to learn much faster than ordinary people. I think I can play the thinking you just taught me, Song Qingshu said with some excitement. But he was surprised to find that Zhao Min had fallen asleep on the table. Only then did Song Qingshu remember that Zhao Min had stayed up all night to plan for the future. This morning, she had started teaching him how to play the zither. Listening to his own messy zither music, she probably could not take it anymore and fell asleep. Although it was obvious that she was tired, her delicate skin still made her look beautiful. She was usually in high spirits, but now that she was asleep, her slightly furrowed eyebrows made people feel pity for her. Song Qingshu knew that sleeping on her stomach was very uncomfortable, so he got up and gently carried her to the bed. His movements had never been so gentle before, for fear that he would wake her up if he was not careful. After covering her with the quilt, Song Qingshu returned to the bedside and gently figured out the finger technique. Because he was worried that he would wake up the sleeping person, he did not really play the music. Instead, his 10 fingers were moving in the air. While he was exploring the finger technique, Zhao Min, who was on the bed, suddenly opened her eyes wide. She quietly stared at his back in a daze. Although Song Qingshu's movements were gentle enough, a woman's natural instinct made her immediately wake up. But for some reason, she didn't show it. Song Qingshu, who usually had a glib tongue, did not do anything else. His gentle and considerate actions caused Zhao Min's heart to gradually soften. Thus, she revealed a faint smile as she looked at his back. She completely relaxed and unknowingly fell into a deep sleep. In the next 2 days, One studied without eating or sleeping, and the other taught with all her heart. Soon, Song Qing-shu reached the level where he could finish his apprenticeship. Although he is still far from being a famous musician, he should be able to apply for a musician. Zhao Min evaluated. What identity should I use to apply for the job? Song Qing-shu asked. Although there were no television or newspapers in this world, and his photos were not all over the world, there were still many people who had seen him. Moreover, there might be a Murong Jinghua hiding. Naturally, he could not go to the mansion of Wei with his original appearance. I have already forged an identity for you. Zhao Min took out a document and handed it to him. You are a down-and-out musician outside the border. Because of the chaos of the 3 border defenses, you had to leave your hometown to make a living. Not long ago, you came to Shangjing City. Song Qing-shu knew that only by setting the background to the faraway border would he not be found out by Yellow Eason. But staring at the name on the document, he could not help but exclaim, Zhao Wei, why does he have such a strange name? And he has the same surname as you. There are many people with stranger names in the world. Zhao Min blushed for some reason and quickly replied, What's more, this person really exists. A few days ago, he heard that the mansion of Wei was recruiting a dormitory, so he rushed to Shangjing City. Halfway, he was intercepted by our people, so you replaced his identity. I see. Song Qing-shu nodded, stood up, and said, There's no time to lose. I'll go disguise myself first, and I'll go to the mansion of Wei to apply for the job later. I hope my efforts in the past 2 days were not in vain. Zhao Min also stretched, revealing a seductive curve of her chest. I won't send you off. I'm exhausted these few days, so I need to catch up on my sleep. After saying that, she collapsed on the bed and fell asleep without a care for her image. Song Qing-shu smiled and returned to his room. While putting on a disguise, he talked about the following arrangements with Icy Snow, who had rushed over after hearing the news. Icy Snow was worried. The Wei Wangfu is dangerous everywhere. Furthermore, we don't know where Murong Jinghua is hiding. You must be extra careful. Song Qing-shu said with a smile, Don't worry. I've even gone in and out of the palace countless times. A mere mansion of a down-and-out empire is nothing to me. He wasn't afraid of raising flags. After all, in the face of absolute strength, he had the confidence to face all difficulties. 2 hours later, Song Qing-shu appeared in front of the prince of Wei's residence. At this moment, he had the appearance of a downtrodden zither player. Even those who were most familiar with him would not be able to recognize him as the Prince of Qi whose might had shaken the world. Are you here to apply for the zither player position? What's your name? Where are you from? The main door of the mansion naturally wouldn't open for ordinary people. At the side door, a person who looked like an official stood there and asked arrogantly, as expected of a rank 7 official in front of the Prime Minister's door. Song Qing-shu sighed inwardly. However, he wasn't angry over such a small matter. After all, in order to reach the peak of the disguise technique, apart from having similar looks, one's personality and tone must also be the same. Zhao Wei. Song Qing-shu answered the other party's questions one by one. Suddenly, his heart stirred. Zhao Wei, Zhao Wei. Could it be Zhao Min's Wei? Such a guess surprised and delighted him. After all, although Zhao Min had an ambiguous relationship with him, she had never formally expressed her feelings. Could it be that she wanted to use this method to confess her feelings? However, Song Qing-shu quickly thought that with Zhao Min's character, she probably wouldn't do such a wishy-washy thing. Moreover, she had also mentioned that Zhao Wei really existed, and he was just replacing his identity. It should be a coincidence. Although he kept telling himself that Song Qing-shu's heart was suddenly filled with an inexplicable expectation. After the interrogation, Song Qing-shu was led to a side courtyard. He secretly recalled what Zhao Min had taught him in the past 2 days. He was afraid that he would forget what he had learned at the last minute at a critical moment. Then he saw that there was more than one person in the side courtyard. They must be the musicians from various places who had heard the news. Although Song Qing-shu was not confident, after all, he had been through a lot, and such a small scene was not enough to make him nervous. At most, I'll just use the soul transfer technique to cheat on the examiner. Song Qing-shu thought to himself. If he couldn't do it, he might as well use some extraordinary means. Soon, someone came to interview them on some questions about music. Many people were eliminated, but Song Qing-shu passed the first round without any mishaps. Then, a person who looked like a butler came out and said, "Everyone knows how to be an armchair strategist. In the end, it still depends on your zither skills. In a while, a noble will come to judge. Remember not to make a noise, and don't be rude to the noble." The people around him nodded submissively. After all, this was the Prince of Wei's mansion, and they could lose their lives if they were not careful. Song Qing-shu didn't mind. He just thought to himself, "I wonder who the noble is. It can't be Yelu Isin, can it?" Suddenly, his ears twitched. He heard a string of gentle footsteps, accompanied by the faint sound of jingling pendants. As the footsteps got closer, there seemed to be an additional elegant fragrance in the air. It was like an orchid, but not an orchid, and like musk, but not in musk. Today, the geographical map of Liao was updated, as well as the escape route of the protagonist in the previous chapters. Combined with the topographic map, it will be more intuitive. Interested readers can go to the public account. Monthly review in the latest article. Chapter 1534. Unlike the people around him who were looking down at their toes in trepidation, afraid that they would be killed if they looked any longer, Song Qing-shu carefully looked inside and saw a graceful figure slowly walking in from behind the curtain. Oh, it's Shin Bijuan? Although he couldn't see her face through the curtain, Song Qing-shu could tell from her figure and the sound of her footsteps whether it was the same person. In particular, the unique fragrance on her body that was like an orchid or a musk was even more unforgettable. One by one, play what you're best at and wait outside for the results, the butler said. Shin Bijuan was the judge. Song Qing-shu was a little surprised, but on second thought, it was expected. After all, the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting were things that the Han people were good at. In terms of zither skills, there was probably no one in Shangjing who could compare to Shin Bijuan. Naturally, there was no one more suitable than her. Next, one by one, Song Qing-shu went up to play. Before he was still in high spirits, but now his heart gradually sank. After all, he was making a last-minute effort, and the people who came were all famous people from all over the country. All of them had been immersed in the zither for decades. How could he catch up in such a short time? Although he was a layman before, after 2 days of tutoring, Song Qing-shu could easily judge the quality of his zither skills. He roughly calculated that there were at least 8 people present who were better than him. This time, there was only one person to be a zither master. No matter how good he was, he probably wouldn't stand a chance. Could he only rely on the soul transfer technique? Song Qing-shu was a little hesitant. Now that Shin Bijuan was sitting behind the heavy gauze curtains, he couldn't even see her eyes. How could he use the soul transfer technique? What's more, there were so many famous people present, and they weren't deaf. If he couldn't convince them and won by cheating, it would be a lot of trouble if they made a fuss. Just as he was struggling, he suddenly heard the butler call Zhao Wei. It turned out that it was his turn. He had been a little nervous before, but now that things had come to a head, he calmed down. He had experienced so many storms and waves. A mere zither master interview was nothing. Even if he failed, he could think of another way. He calmly sat down and was about to play the song he had prepared before when he suddenly remembered what Zhao Min had said when he was learning the zither. The zither was the heart of the heart, and the mind of the player would reflect the image in the sound of the zither. This was not an objective competition of their skills, but rather a competition of who Shin Bijuan thought was the best. The other interviewees didn't even know who she was, but he knew who she was. He already had a great advantage. Shin Bijuan had been kidnapped and taken to a foreign country. She had no one to rely on and lived a precarious life. She was filled with fear and dread for the future, and it was likely that she would miss her home and worry a lot. Roughly guessing Shin Bijuan's current mood, Song Qing-shu had a plan. Of course, he couldn't directly play a song about homesickness. After all, Ancient culture paid attention to euphemism, and he couldn't express what he was thinking so directly. Thus, he began to play Thinking. Thinking was an ancient song from the Han Dynasty. It had a gentle rhythm, and the most amazing thing about this song was that it had different effects depending on the audience. If people who lived carefreely and happily listened to it, they would only feel that it was bland and tasteless. However, if the listener happened to be in the mood to be sad, it would be amazing. It would easily arouse the thoughts in the other party's heart. When someone was heartbroken, they would think of the past and the love of the deceased. As for Shun Bijuan, it could be said that she had a lot on her mind at the moment. As expected, after the sound of the zither sounded, Shun Bijuan, who had been sitting there, suddenly trembled. She couldn't help but take out a handkerchief to gently wipe her tears. It had to be known that a noble young miss like Shun Bijuan had been very strict with her bearing since she was a child. This was proof that her emotions were extremely agitated. When Song Qing-shu saw that there was hope, he subconsciously infused his internal energy into the sound, making it even more penetrative and able to touch people's souls. It wasn't just Shun Bijuan. Many of the other zither masters had confused and complicated expressions on their faces. It was clear that the sound of a zither had stirred up their thoughts. Before the song finished, Shun Bijuan suddenly stood up from behind the curtain and hurriedly left with the help of her maids. The zither players outside were all stunned. What's going on? Why did she leave? We haven't even played yet. As the crowd was whispering, the housekeeper from before came out and announced, "The interview is over. Everyone can go back." What's going on? That's it. But we haven't played yet. The crowd was in an uproar, but when they saw the housekeeper's cold expression, they realized that this was King Wei's manner. They didn't dare act presumptuously and could only dejectedly leave. Although Song Qing-shu had some confidence, he wasn't sure if he should leave or not. Fortunately, the housekeeper came over and called out to him, "Zhao Wei, right? Come with me. It seems I've made the right bet." Song Qing-shu felt like a huge stone had been lifted from his heart. The housekeeper took many twists and turns before bringing him to an extremely remote courtyard. He then threatened, "Brat, the noble person inside wants to see you. You must remember your status. If you offend the noble person, I'll throw you into the mass grave outside the city tonight." "Yes, yes, yes." Song Qing-shu pretended to be a yes man as he thought to himself, "Shun Bijuan has already been moved to King Wei's manor. It seems that Yelu Yisin is indeed preparing to send her to the palace. On one hand, he can appease Xiao Xia, and on the other, he can deepen his influence into the harem. After all, since ancient times, powerful officials always needed the help of a favored concubine in the palace. However, Shun Bijuan had been captured by them, so how could she possibly follow Yelu Yisin's orders so obediently? Weren't they afraid that she would tell the emperor everything after entering the palace? While he was deep in thought, Song Qing-shu had already walked in. Shun Bijuan was sitting in a pavilion, staring blankly toward the south. There were two pretty maids standing to the side to serve her, but because they were next to Shun Bijuan, no one would pay attention to them. Although Song Qing-shu had seen Shun Bijuan once before and only saw her profile this time, he still couldn't help but feel amazed. She wasn't wearing particularly gorgeous clothes, but no matter what kind of clothes she wore, as long as she wore them, they would become exceptionally outstanding. She didn't wear any jewelry, nor did she put any makeup on her face because for her, jewelry and makeup were superfluous. No matter how precious the jewelry was, it couldn't take away her brilliance, and no matter how noble the makeup was, it couldn't add to her beauty. Song Qing-shu had seen many stunning beauties, but most of them were chivalrous women in Jianghu. It was the first time he had seen a lady from a noble family who was gentle, beautiful, and elegant like Shun Bijuan. In fact, Nanlan and Cheng Yaojia could also be considered ladies from a noble family, but Cheng Yaojia wasn't a stunning beauty. Nanlan was, after all, a married woman. Her temperament was still very different from Shun Bijuan's. Perhaps only Xue Baochai, whom he had met in Linen, could be compared to her. But after seeing the other side of Xue Baochai in the Imperial City Department, The mark of a noble family on her was not so obvious. Reminded by the maid, Shun Bijuan turned her head and looked at him curiously with her beautiful eyes. She asked softly, "Are you from the Song dynasty?" Chapter 1535. Song Qing-shu was startled. Could it be that he had exposed himself somewhere? But when he noticed Shin Bijuan's expectant gaze, he realized that it was most likely the song that had stirred her thoughts. "No, I'm from outside the borders." "Oh." Shin Bijuan's disappointment was evident. "When I heard you play Thinking just now, although your technique was a bit shaky, the meaning behind the song was extremely high. I thought you were from the South." "Thank you for your praise, Mississippi." Hearing her evaluation, Song Qingshu sighed to himself that he had gambled correctly. As expected, it was impossible to win with technique. Knowing that he wasn't from the song, Shin Bijuan quickly lost interest and no longer spoke. She sighed faintly and turned to leave, leaving Song Qingshu alone with a dumbfounded expression. "What's going on?" Just as Song Qingshu was feeling gloomy, someone led him to a nearby residence and warned him not to go out as he pleased. Otherwise, his life would be in danger. If it was a normal zither player, they wouldn't care even if their freedom was restricted. But Song Qingshu naturally wouldn't be so obedient. After the person left, he quietly slipped out. Unfortunately, this kind of aimless search was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Song Qingshu walked around the Wei Palace, but didn't find any valuable clues. He had originally planned to go see how Yilu Nancian was doing, but when he snuck in her room, he found that she wasn't there. Listening to the conversation of two passing maids, ever since her brother Yilu Sui's incident, she would often go out searching for the murderer, often disappearing for 3 to 5 days. Song Qingshu returned to his room dispiritedly. This was different from what he had imagined. Even though he had infiltrated the Prince of Wei's mansion, it seemed that it would be difficult to find anything useful. Was he really going to stay here for 10 days to half a month? Just as he was lying on his bed, bored to death, a maid came to inform him that Shun Bijuan was calling for him. Song Qingshu was a bit puzzled. Was his charm so great that, even with his disguise, he couldn't hide his attraction to women? Of course, this was just a joke. He knew that Shun Bijuan hadn't come looking for him because she liked him. There had to be something else. Along the way, he wondered if he should get closer to Shun Bijuan. Perhaps he could get some information about the Mandarin duck blades from her. After all, the Mandarin duck blades had been kept by the Shun family for more than 10 years. Unfortunately, when he saw Shun Bijuan, he saw that her face was as cold as ice. She was no longer as amiable as before. His heart skipped a beat, and he swallowed all of his plans. "I don't know who you are, nor do I know your goal in coming here." Shin Bijuan gave him a fright as soon as she opened her mouth. Song Qingshu wondered if his disguise skills were so bad that even a young miss who never left her room could see through him. Fortunately, Shun Bijuan's next words made her sigh in relief. "In the next few days, I will teach you some of the local customs of the Southern Court. No matter what it is, I will only say it once. As for whether you can remember it or not, that will depend on your ability." The local customs of the Southern Court? Song Qingshu was completely confused. Fortunately, he was a transmigrator from the future and had read countless novels and dramas. Although he only had a few words, he could roughly restore the original situation. It was most likely that Yelu Isin had asked her to teach him the local customs of the Southern Court. Thus, she had subconsciously thought that he was Yelu Isin's confidant, and thus didn't treat him well. As for why Shin Bijuan would listen to Yelu Isin's instructions, it wasn't hard to understand. There were simply too many ways to make a delicate woman submit. Song Qingshu casually imagined that if it were him, there would be at least 23 ways to make her obedient. The word teach lingered in his mind. As for why Yelu Isin had asked her to teach him the local customs of the Southern Court, this was something he couldn't understand. While he was still thinking, Shun Bijuan began to speak. The entire process could be said to be extremely fast, and from time to time, she would mix in the dialect of Shaoxing. It should be known that nowadays, the dialects of Zhejiang were often difficult to understand even if they were separated by a village, let alone in ancient times. Miss, can you speak an official language? Song Qing-shu naturally knew that she was doing this on purpose. Even the most gentle of ladies would find it difficult to be in a good mood after being kidnapped and constantly threatened. In addition, she thought that he was one of Yelu Isin's people, so it wasn't surprising that she was deliberately making things difficult for him. Since I want to teach you the local customs, these Shawnee dialects are naturally the local customs. Seeing his sweaty appearance, Shin Bijuan couldn't help but smile. Her mood, which had been clouded for the past few days, finally showed a trace of happiness. Shin Bijuan's face had always been full of worry, but now, for the first time, she smiled. Although it was only a faint smile, it was like the first flowers blooming after the snow melted. In the past, only Xiaolong knew had given him a similar impact. Seeing him staring at her in a daze, Shun Bijuan immediately realized that she had lost her composure. She immediately straightened her face and continued to explain. This time, in order to punish him, not only did she still use the Shawnee dialect, but she also deliberately spoke faster. Soon, more than 2 hours had passed. Shin Bijuan looked at him maliciously. Let's stop here for today. How much do you remember? About 70 to 80%. In reality, with Song Qingshu's current memory, he actually remembered everything. He just didn't want to attract too much attention. So he said he remembered 70 to 80%. Even this was enough to shock Shin Bijuan, but she didn't believe it. Shameless boasting. The disgust on her face became even stronger. It had to be known that she had mostly used the Shawnee dialect to explain. Not to mention the northerners, even the people of the Song country wouldn't be able to understand. Shin Bijuan was the #1 beauty of Shawnee City, and her reputation had spread far and wide. Ever since she could remember, many young masters liked to go to the Shun Gardens and use the poetry and lantern festivals to show off. Many times, in order to not show weakness in front of her, they would pretend to understand and pretend to be something that was in the sky. This kind of man was what she despised the most. Thinking of how Song Qingshu was in a daze when he saw her, Shun Bijuan unconsciously thought that he was the same kind of person. She was too lazy to say another word to him and turned to leave with a heavy expression. Song Qingshu shrugged his shoulders and thought to himself, "Who did I offend? I can clearly understand. Do I have to lie and say that I don't understand?" It had to be known that Miss Cheng, Lu Wushuang, and the others had lived in Shawnee City for a long time. They had spent the most time with Miss Cheng. That sweet-tempered young woman was usually the most shy and reserved. Occasionally, when they were in bed, she would uncontrollably speak in a special tone. It was clear and lively, very rhythmic, and very pleasant to listen to. Song Qingshu asked and found out that it was the Shawnee dialect. Because he wanted to know what Miss Cheng said when she was aroused, he pestered her to learn the Shawnee dialect. At first, Miss Cheng didn't agree, but she couldn't stand his coaxing and pestering. She taught him sentence by sentence, and with Song Qingshu's amazing memory, he was able to learn most of it. When he heard Shin Bijuan speak the Shawnee dialect, he wasn't used to it at first, but after getting used to it, he found that he could actually understand it. There were some parts that he didn't understand that he could guess from the context. Who knew that Shun Bijuan would misunderstand? Chapter 1536. Over the next few days, one taught Song Qingshu about the customs of the South while the other studied seriously. Because Song Qingshu could understand the Mountainine language and had a good understanding of the South, he learned quickly. Of course, in Shun Bijuan's eyes, he was just pretending to understand. 2 days later, Yelu Isin suddenly appeared with some people and asked how Song Qingshu was doing. Shin Bijuan deliberately praised him, saying that he now knew the customs of the South like the back of his hand. Many people in Jiangnan could not compare to him. At first, Song Qingshu was a bit dazed. He didn't understand why Shin Bijuan suddenly spoke up for him, but he quickly realized that she was deliberately putting him on a pedestal to raise Yelu Isin's expectations. When the time came, the higher he was, the harder he would fall. As expected, the astute Yelu Isin was clearly not satisfied with listening to her side of the story. Instead, He personally tested Song Qing-shu on some of the customs of the South. After all, this was related to a very important plan. He asked all kinds of questions, and Song Qing-shu was secretly surprised. Yalu Isin was a Khitan, but no one had such a deep understanding of Han culture. But then he thought about it. The nomads of the north had a certain degree of Han culture after entering the Central Plains. Even the emperor and empress imitated the Han people in poetry and painting. It wasn't strange for a noble to know these things. Song Qing-shu was only surprised, but Shun Bijuan's eyes widened in shock. Many of Yalu Isin's questions were relatively unfamiliar, and even she didn't know how to answer them. Who would have thought that this man would answer so cleverly? After the test, Yalu Isin was very satisfied with the result. Miss Shun is indeed a famous, talented woman to be able to teach like this in just a few days. Of course, he didn't think that this ordinary zither player was talented and subconsciously attributed it to Shun Bijuan. Shun Bijuan had an awkward expression and didn't know how to respond. She secretly glanced at Song Qing-shu and saw that his expression was calm and didn't seem angry at all. He also didn't have any intention of complaining to Yalu Isin. She couldn't help but secretly sigh in relief. Then she became even more curious. So he didn't lie to me, but how did he understand the Shawneen language? By the way, I came here today to inform you that you will be sent to the Imperial Palace tomorrow morning, Yalu Isin suddenly said. Us? Song Qing-shu was stunned. That's right. As a zither player, you will enter the palace with Shun, cough cough, Miss Xiao. Yalu Isin had changed his address at the last minute. Shun Bijuan was no longer the young miss of the Shun family from Jiangnan. She now had a new identity, the younger sister of the son-in-law Xiao Xiamao, Xiao Tansi. Song Qing-shu glanced at Shun Bijuan and saw that her face was expressionless. Yalu Isin had clearly informed her beforehand. What? Do you have a problem? Yalu Isin's eyes flashed fiercely. No problem. Song Qing-shu forced a smile. He thought that he had to find a chance to discuss this with Zhao Min. After all, he had infiltrated the Wei household to investigate Murong Jingyue's whereabouts. Now that he had found nothing and was being transferred to the Imperial Palace, wouldn't that mean that all his previous efforts had been for naught? That's good, Yalu Isin said lightly. Miss Xiao, please return to your room and rest. I still have some things to tell Sir Zhao. In reality, he had no intention of consulting Shun Bijuan. As soon as he finished speaking, a servant girl supported Shun Bijuan and left. But as Shun Bijuan left, she looked deeply at Song Qing-shu. As expected, he was one of Yalu Isin's people. The faint trace of apology and curiosity that had risen up earlier instantly disappeared. After Shun Bijuan left, Yalu Isin's face suddenly darkened. You should know what you're going to do after entering the palace. Song Qing-shu was shocked. He thought, what the hell do I know? I didn't expect that Zhao Min would actually trigger a hidden plot by randomly choosing someone to impersonate. Seeing him stutter, Yalu Isin sneered. I know what you're worried about. I came here today to tell you that I have arranged for your parents, wife, and children to be well protected in a safe place. As long as you follow my instructions obediently, they'll be fine. Yes. Song Qing-shu lowered his head slightly, taking the opportunity to hide his shocked eyes. He wondered what task Yalu Isin had given Zhao Wei. It seemed that Zhao Wei had been selected long ago. Even if he hadn't performed exceedingly to arouse Shun Bijuan's worries, he would still have been selected in the end. After nightfall, Song Qing-shu secretly found a chance to sneak out and return to the little south tower. He told Zhao Min and Icy Snow what had happened today. Hearing that he was going to be sent to the palace as a dowry, the two women laughed unkindly, making Song Qing-shu's face turn darker. After laughing, Zhao Min said, It's good to take this opportunity to enter the palace to investigate. I suspect that Murong Jingyue's other hiding place is in the palace. But what about the Wei Wangfu? Song Qing-shu frowned. I have sent a few people to infiltrate the Wei Wangfu through other means in order to support you. Let them be in charge of the investigation. Zhao Min continued, and it seems that Yalu Isin has a big plan. If we don't do anything, it may harm our interests. You should take advantage of the situation and develop things in our favor at the critical moment. Song Qingshu nodded. That's good too. Thinking about how Xiao Ban and Yalu Qi were framed, he vaguely felt that Yalu Isin was weaving a big net. He just didn't know who would be caught in it in the end. He realized that he couldn't see through Yalu Isin. In the future, they would most likely be enemies because of their different standpoints. At that time, how to face Yalu Nancian would be a big problem. That Miss Shun is also a pitiful person. Qingshu, help her if you can. Icy Snow had heard about Shun Bijuan's experience from Zhao Min. She couldn't help but sympathize with her. The kind-hearted Icy Snow couldn't help but advise Song Qingshu. Before Song Qingshu could answer, Zhao Min burst into laughter. Elder sister, you can rest assured. Even if he did not say anything, with his tender and protective nature, he would definitely not sit by and watch young Lady Shin suffer. Am I right, young Master Song? Song Qingshu hurriedly said sternly, Of course, it's the duty of us righteous people to fight the strong and help the weak. TSK, you make it sound nice. Zhao Min snorted disdainfully. Why don't you go help those homeless beggars on the roadside? At this time, Icy Snow also pursed her lips and smiled. I heard that Miss Shun is known as the first beauty in Shanin City. She must be very beautiful. She's not just the first beauty in Shanin City. If it weren't for the fact that she stays at home and doesn't have a good reputation, it wouldn't be a problem for her to compete for the first beauty in Jiangnan. Zhao Min recalled the scene when she first met her and couldn't help sighing. Even a woman like me can't help but be moved by that pitiful look, let alone some playboys. Song Qingshu broke into a sweat. When did you two become so tacit? You're teaming up to tease me. Zhao Min raised her smooth, jade-like chin. I'm just reminding you not to be blinded by beauty. Song Qingshu couldn't stand the two women's continuous bombardment. He hurriedly said that he had been out for too long and was afraid of being discovered by Wei Wangfu's people. Hearing the two women's bell-like laughter coming from the room behind him, he couldn't help but sigh. No wonder the emperors of each dynasty would let the women in the harem fight each other. Otherwise, if those women were happy and harmonious, they would unite to target the men. When he returned to Wei Wangfu, Song Qingshu suddenly saw a shadow flash in the corner of his eyes. He turned his head and saw a black shadow flying into the Fu from a remote place. His Qinggong is actually this good? Song Qingshu was startled. A Qinggong that he recognized was definitely first-rate in Jianghu. His expression immediately became strange. Usually, the Qinggong of a rapist in Jianghu was not bad. Moreover, he didn't look like a good person from sneaking around. It would be bad if he had any ideas about Yalu Nancian. With this thought in mind, he could no longer suppress the worry in his heart. He hurriedly and quietly followed. The black-clothed man's movement technique was exquisite, and he was also very alert. From time to time, he would look back to see if anyone was following him. Fortunately, Song Qingshu's Qinggong had reached an unprecedented level. Otherwise, he really might have been discovered. Seeing that the black-clothed man did not go in the direction of Yalu Nancian's residence, but instead headed towards the western courtyard, Song Qingshu finally relaxed. It seemed like he wasn't looking for Yalu Nancian. Suddenly, he remembered that Yalu Nancian hadn't been home for the past few days. He had worried for nothing. But very quickly, his expression turned serious again. He found that the direction the black-clothed man was heading in was a little familiar. It was the place he had been living for a while. Of course, Song Qingshu didn't think that this person would go through so much trouble to sneak into Wei Wangfu just to find a downtrodden zither player. It was obvious that he was aiming for a more attractive target. As expected, the black-clothed man turned left and right and finally arrived at Shun Bijuan's courtyard. The guard station in the courtyard didn't even have time to react before he killed them with a single slash. It could be said that in the blink of an eye, a cold light appeared in the black-clothed man's hand. The speed of his sword was so fast that it was rarely seen in the world. Shui Yi's men, seeing the other party attack, Song Qingshu had already recognized his identity. When Yalu Nancian's brother was killed in prison, He had suspected that it was Shui Yi's men who did it, so he went to find Qin Kaching and the others. But when he arrived at the Southern Song stronghold, it was already empty, and it was obvious that there had been a fierce battle. I wonder how Qin Kaching is doing. As the saying goes, a night of marriage means 100 days of love. Qin Kaching's soft body and endless gentleness and charm was something that Song Qingshu couldn't forget. After recognizing the other party's identity, Song Qingshu wasn't in a hurry to show himself. After all, Shui was from the Imperial City Department and had been investigating Shun Bijuan's whereabouts. Perhaps he was here to rescue her. The moment Shui entered the room, there were two muffled groans. It was clear that Shun Bijuan's maid had been knocked unconscious. Sensing a black-clothed person barging in, Shun Bijuan subconsciously cried out, but Shui quickly said, "Young Miss Shun, I'm from the Imperial City Department." Outside the window, Song Qingshu frowned. Shui had actually called her Miss Shun and not Crown Princess. But thinking about it, it was easy to understand. After this incident, even if Shun Bijuan was still pure, the Southern Song Imperial family wouldn't allow her to become the Crown Princess. These 2 days, the university's tutors had come here to play and had to receive them, so the updates were a bit unstable. In addition, the most recent chapter mentioned Shun Bijuan. Last night, on a whim, he wrote a picture about Shun Bijuan and posted it on the public account. Those who were interested could add the public account, Monk Lu Ru, and see what the #1 beauty of the martial world looked like. Chapter 1537. Shun Bijuan was pleasantly surprised. Someone from the Imperial City Department? Even though Shui Yiren was a high-ranking member of the Imperial City Department, she was just a young miss raised in her own home. Naturally, she didn't recognize him. "Young Miss Shun, where is the deer-cutting knife you were escorting?" Shui Yiren's gaze quickly swept across the room. Unfortunately, there was no place to hide the knife. Outside the window, Song Qingshu sighed inwardly. This Shui Yiren had really lost all human emotions in order to practice the sword. He ignored such a beautiful woman in front of him in the middle of the night and went to ask where the knife was. Was this any different from Sun Wukong going to eat a peach after capturing the 7 fairies? Hearing his words, Shun Bijuan imperceptibly furrowed her brow. "Have you found the culprit who destroyed the Shin Garden?" Shui Yiren's attention had been focused on searching the room for the deer-cutting knife. When he heard her words, he was shocked. "How do you know something happened to the Shin Garden?" Not to mention him. Even Song Qingshu was shocked. Shun Bijuan was imprisoned here, so how could she know what was happening 1,000 li away? But on second thought, she suddenly realized that the only possibility was that Yelu Isin told her on purpose. No wonder she agreed to pretend to be Xiao Xiaoma's sister and enter the palace. First, the Shun family had been destroyed, and even if she escaped, she would be alone. Second, she could use the power of Liao to avenge her parents by becoming an imperial concubine. You don't need to know how I know. Just tell me who the culprit is. Shun Bijuan was originally a delicate and timid young miss. She had been raised as a young lady from a noble family. Her words were always gentle and calm, but now there was a trace of coldness in her voice. It seemed like hatred really could change a person the fastest. Shui Yiren shook his head. The culprit's methods were very clean, and it was done in the middle of the night. Even though we found a few suspects, we eliminated them one by one. "So you haven't found anything?" Shun Bijuan said coldly. "Young Miss Shun, don't worry. The Imperial City Department has already been mobilized. We will definitely find the culprit," Shui Yiren comforted. Shui Yiren comforted her. He then changed the topic and continued. "Miss Shun, where is your deer-cutting knife?" Song Qingshu, who was outside the window, could not help but sneer. Shui had indeed become stupid from practicing the sword. He was not good at interacting with people, and his conversation was so stiff. As expected, Shun Bijuan's eyes were filled with wariness. "Are you here to save me, or to find the deer cutter?" Shui stilled, clearly stumped by her question. In the beginning, the imperial court had indeed tried to find this future crown princess at all costs. Unfortunately, the people of the Imperial City Department could not find her no matter how hard they searched. As time dragged on, everyone lost hope of finding her. Moreover, Shun Bijuan was a famous beauty. After being missing for so long, she had probably been raped by bandits. After the Jinkong incident, countless concubines and princesses were kidnapped and raped. It was a thorn in the hearts of the royal family and the government's bottom line. In recent years, there had been a rise in Confucianism to encourage women to keep their chastity. In other words, the public opinion of the entire country was that it was noble for women to sacrifice their lives to protect their chastity. Men did not have the ability to protect their women and instead wanted them to sacrifice their lives to keep their chastity. This was criticized by many in later generations, but it was still the mainstream view in this world. After discovering that Shun Bijuan had been missing for so long, even the most anxious crown prince was not as concerned. Moreover, the Shun family had been destroyed. Without the political support of the other family, she was not a suitable marriage partner. Although the crown prince was young, he was born in the royal family and naturally understood the rules of the game. It was not difficult to make a choice. His only regret was that he could not enjoy the beauty of his fiancée. Shui hesitated here. In fact, all the forces in Lin and did not want Shun Bijuan to appear again. It was just that no one came out to point it out. Shui was a core member of the Shui family and naturally understood all this. However, although he was not good with words, he was not a fool. He knew that telling the truth was not a good idea. He suddenly had an idea and said, "According to our latest findings, the case of the Shun family being destroyed is related to the whereabouts of the deer cutter. If Miss Shun can provide us with the whereabouts of the deer cutter, I believe it will help us solve the case as soon as possible." Outside the window, Song Qingshu secretly shook his head. If Shun Bijuan was still the naive and sweet young lady she used to be, she might really believe this. However, during this period of being trapped in a wolf's den, she had no choice but to mature. Song Qingshu had been with her these days and could clearly feel her growth. As he expected, Shun Bijuan shook her head and said, "Come and find me when you find the murderer of the Shun family." Shui was a person who had killed his way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Suppressing his temper for this long was already his limit. Hearing her words, he finally could not hold it in anymore and said, "Miss Shun, you must know that the only person who can help you now is me. It is very difficult for me if you do not cooperate." He no longer concealed his murderous aura. No matter how much Shun Bijuan had grown, how could she withstand such an aura? She subconsciously took a few steps back. Thanks to the stubbornness in her bones, she did not fall to the ground and said, I will only tell you the whereabouts of the deer cutter after we find the murderer of the Shun family." Looking at her stubbornly raising her head, Song Qingshu somewhat admired her. It seemed that he had misunderstood her before. In the original novel, the woman who could betray her family in marriage for freedom was not a weak person who would submit to adversity. Shui looked deeply at her. Miss Shun probably does not even know where the deer cutter is. A trace of panic flashed through Shun Bijuan's eyes. Even though she quickly concealed it, it could not be hidden from an experienced person like Shui. Miss Shun is a bird in someone's cage. The Mandarin duck blade is most likely in the hands of the person who captured you. Northern Bureau Secret Envoy Yeluisin. "I'll go find him directly," Shui said lightly and turned as if he was about to leave. Song Qingshu was feeling a bit of schadenfreude. In reality, he had always wanted to test Yeluisin, but he was afraid of alerting the enemy. Adding on that the other was Yelu Nanshin's father, he had to be cautious. It was good that someone had done this for him. Suddenly, his eyes focused because he felt a murderous aura. If it was just Shui's aura before, now he really had murderous intent. "Miss Shun, do you know that many people do not wish for you to live in this world?" Shui said lightly with his back to Shun Bijuan. Shun Bijuan was first shocked and then gave a self-deprecating laugh. Of course, how could those people in the palace tolerate the existence of a crown princess who has brought shame to the imperial family? Miss Shun's bearing is admirable. I have seen too many heroes of the Jiang who shout so loudly before they die. Shui said emotionally. But Miss Shun, do not worry. In the future, the world will only know that you were unyielding and committed suicide to prove your innocence. The people of Jinshan Academy will even write you into the women's biography. At that time, your name will go down in history and bring glory to the Shun family. Chapter 1538. Outside the window, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but sigh. He was black-bellied enough, but compared to these real politicians, he paled in comparison. These people were black-hearted and didn't care about a person's life at all. Am I going to die? At this moment, Shun Bijuan's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion. No matter how calm she was still just a teenage girl. She had always been a flower in a greenhouse, and now that she was suddenly faced with death, she felt a sense of loss and unwillingness. She thought that she would die before she could avenge her parents, and a strong desire to live arose in her heart. Unfortunately, although she didn't know martial arts, she could see that the person in front of her was very skilled. It was not someone she could fight against. Who can save me? She wanted to shout for help, but when she opened her mouth, no sound came out. The intense nervousness made her lose her voice. Just as Shui Yiren was about to draw his sword, there was suddenly a knock on the door. Miss Shun, Miss Shun? He couldn't help but frown, and the sword in his hand subconsciously stopped. Shen Bijuan could tell that it was Zhao Wei's voice. Although she had always hated him because he was Yelu Isen's confidant, his voice was like the sound of nature at this time. Who is outside? Shui Yiren asked in a low voice. After all, he was in the Wei Palace, so he didn't dare to be careless. It's Yelu Isen's subordinate. Shen Bijuan had just recovered from a shock, and her voice was trembling. Miss Shun, sir asked me to ask you some questions. Can I come in? The voice outside sounded again. Shui Yiren frowned. According to his character, he would kill them all with a sword, but he had come with a mission this time. He wondered if this person was here to ask about the whereabouts of the deer-cutting knife, so he lowered his voice and said to Shen Bijuan, act according to the situation later. Don't reveal that I am here, or else. He didn't finish his sentence, and just held the sword against the back of her waist. Although they were separated by clothes, the coldness from the sword had already caused a layer of goosebumps to appear on Shen Bijuan's skin. After threatening her, Shui Yiren flashed behind the screen. At this time, Song Qing-shu had already opened the door. If he had pushed open the door without permission on any other day, Shen Bijuan would have scolded him. But today, she was so excited that she wanted to cry. She wanted to take this opportunity to leave, but a terrifying aura locked onto her. Although she didn't know martial arts, she knew that if she moved, she would be killed on the spot. She had no choice but to continue sitting in the chair in front of the screen. She gave Zhao Wei a look and said, "What do you want?" Seeing that eldest Miss Shun, who usually paid great attention to her bearing, was blinking so much that sparks were almost flying out of her eyes, Song Qing-shu secretly laughed and pretended to be at a loss. Are your eyes cramping? Why do you keep blinking? Shen Bijuan, who was usually well-mannered, wanted to curse at him. What kind of stupid teammate was this? This person in front of her was the perfect example. She was just about to say something when she felt the killing intent behind her increase. It was clearly a warning. It's mainly because I forgot what you taught me 2 days ago, so I came to ask you. Song Qing-shu knew that he had teased her enough and was worried that things would get out of hand. It's mainly because I forgot what Miss taught me 2 days ago, so I came to ask Miss again. Song Qing-shu knew that he had teased enough and was worried that he would get angry if he continued. But she was smart. When she saw Zhao Wei blink, she quickly realized that he was probably using this as an excuse to save her. However, she was also considered smart. When she saw Zhao Wei blink quietly, she quickly realized that he was probably using this as an excuse to save her. What did you forget? Shen Bijuan suppressed the joy in her heart and asked calmly. Song Qing-shu smiled and quickly said in the Shanin language, Miss Shun, I have already informed the guards in the residence. We will temporarily stabilize the person behind you. The south was different from the north. The southern language could be separated by a mountain or a river, not to mention that the Shanin language was notoriously difficult to understand. Although Shui Yiren was also a southerner, there was a high chance that he wouldn't understand. Sure enough, Shui Yiren didn't move after hearing his words. Obviously, he had made the right bet. Shin Bijuan was stunned at first, then she was pleasantly surprised. She also replied in the Shawnee language, "How did you know that something happened to me?" At the same time, she realized that she had misunderstood him in the past. He could communicate with her fluently in the Shawnee language, so it was obvious that her previous difficulties did not affect him. He claimed that he had learned most of the knowledge that she had taught him and was not trying to show off. "I couldn't sleep in the middle of the night and saw him by the window. I was worried that he would harm you, so I secretly followed him." Song Qingshu's answer was reasonable and did not arouse her suspicion at all. "It's all thanks to you today." Shin Bijuan was so touched that she wanted to cry, especially since he had helped her despite what she had done to him previously. She had seen too many evil people these days. Even Shui Yiren, who was supposed to be on her side, wanted to kill her, which made her feel a little hopeless about the world. Suddenly meeting a good person like Zhao Wei made her feel extremely touched. Song Qingshu was about to say something when his expression suddenly changed. He grabbed Shin Bijuan's hand and ran out. At the same time, the screen exploded, and a snow-white light lit up the room. Shui Yiren pulled Shin Bijuan away by himself. The sword had already taken their lives. It turned out that although Shui Yiren didn't understand the Shawnee language, he was not stupid. Seeing that the two of them were communicating quickly, he knew that they were most likely talking about him. So he simply stabbed them with his sword. He would kill Shin Bijuan first to prevent the royal family from being humiliated. He would find Yelu Isin to verify the matter of the deer-cutting knife. As for the man who had come in, he had no interest in understanding him. So what if he killed him? Shin Bijuan blushed when an unfamiliar man suddenly grabbed her hand. The restraint she had developed over 10 years made her extremely angry. Just as she was about to scold him, she suddenly realized something and looked back. She saw Shui Yiren stab out with his sword. The chair she had been sitting on was instantly torn to pieces by the sword energy. If she had been there, it was obvious what would have happened. She had just recovered from the shock and didn't have the time to scold him. Shui Yiren was startled. He clearly hadn't expected the other to react so quickly and pull Shin Bijuan away, causing his sword to miss. However, he wasn't in a hurry because he wouldn't give the two of them any chance for the next attack. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to his wishes. At this time, a dozen or so guards from the Wei Manor rushed in. It turned out that before Song Qingshu had come in, he had used a 1,000-mile sound transmission technique to notify the guards closest to him. At first, they thought it was an auditory hallucination, but since this was related to Shin Bijuan, they didn't dare to be negligent and still sent some people over. They just happened to see Shui Yiren attack Shin Bijuan. The group of people didn't dare to hesitate. As they shouted, they pulled out their swords and charged forward. Shin Bijuan recognized a few of them as the people who had kidnapped her in Jiangnan. These people's martial arts were very high, and the Shin family's guards could be considered elites. Even with the escort army sent by the government, they were not a match for these people. In just a few rounds, they had been completely slaughtered. Even the servant girl accompanying them had been killed with a single slash. At the time, she had hated these people, but now she had no choice but to rely on them to save her life. She hoped that their martial arts were as high as possible. They should be able to delay the person behind us. Shin Bijuan still hadn't woken up from this absurd feeling when she suddenly saw a snowy light flash in front of her. At this moment, it was as if the moon in the sky had lost its color. She couldn't help but close her eyes. When she opened them again, the dozen or so experts who had been full of life seemed to have suddenly stopped moving. Shin Bijuan was startled, but the next scene caused her body to go weak. A bloody mark had appeared on the necks of those experts, and then blood sprayed out, forming a bloody rain that dyed Shui Yiren's body red. Song Qingshu had never agreed with this kind of violent aesthetic. Killing people was killing people, but why did they have to be covered in blood? If this wasn't a pervert, then what was? Blood-robed man. The guard with the highest martial arts barely had a breath left, but after barely managing to shout out a name, he died. Blood-robed man. Shinbijuan's hands and feet went cold. Although she was a young miss, Shui Yiren's status in the Southern Song dynasty was extraordinary. It could be said that he was a legend in the army. Even she had heard of his name, and the elders in her family had boasted that he was invincible. In addition, she was close friends with the seventh miss of the Liu clan, Liu Wushuang. She knew that Liu Wushuang used to be a member of the Jianghu. Out of curiosity, she had once asked Liu Wushuang how Shui Yiren compared to the experts of the Jianghu. Liu Wushuang had told her that Shui Yiren would be a peak expert in the Jianghu, and that there would be no more than 5 people who could defeat him. Then Liu Wushuang had proudly boasted that Song Qingshu was one of them. Seeing Liu Wushuang's exultant expression, Shin Bijuan thought that it was just a young girl admiring her lover. I didn't take it to heart. However, Shui Yiren's strength was deeply imprinted in her mind. She hadn't expected that one day she would have to face the blade of this invincible swordsman. I knew that you guys wouldn't be able to stop Shui Yiren, but you shouldn't be this useless, right? While Shin Bijuan was shocked, Song Qingshu was also extremely depressed. He hadn't expected these guards to be able to defeat Shui Yiren, but he thought that they could at least stop him for a while. Using that bit of time, he and Shin Bijuan could escape to another part of the Wei Manor and wait for the Wei Manor's defense forces to come out and deal with Shui Yiren. Who would have thought that Shui Yiren's unity of man and sword would be so powerful? More than a dozen guards with decent skills were instantly killed by him. Now, the defense of the Wei residents had not even reacted yet, and Shui Yiren was going to use his third strike. Was he going to expose his martial arts? Then wouldn't all the effort he had put in to infiltrate this place be for naught? Song Qingshu was in a dilemma when he suddenly had a thought and looked towards the wall at the side. Shui Yiren seemed to have sensed something as well and raised his head to look in the same direction. Under the moonlight, he saw a young man dressed in white standing there like an immortal. The silver mask on his face made him look even more mysterious. Song Qingshu. Shui Yiren frowned and said in a low voice. Chapter 1539. Hearing Shui Yiren's words, Song Qingshu was startled. His first reaction was to wonder if he had been exposed. However, when he saw that Shui Yiren was not looking at him, but at the person standing on the wall, he realized that Shui Yiren had mistaken that person for him. In actuality, Song Qingshu had immediately recognized that this person was Zhao Min disguised as a man. After all, they had been friends for a long time, and they had even studied the zither together. He was extremely familiar with Zhao Min's posture and even her breathing. Even though she was wearing a mask, it could not be hidden from Song Qingshu's eyes. As for why Shui Yiren had mistaken her, it was most likely because he had seen the silver mask on Zhao Min's face. It had to be known that Song Qingshu would sometimes wear a mask to avoid trouble. Even though not many people knew, the Imperial City Department was the intelligence agency of an empire, so it was not strange for them to find out about this. On the other hand, Shin Bijuan was curiously examining the man on the wall. In these past few years, Song Qingshu's name had spread far and wide. Even she, who had been living in seclusion, had heard of his name for a long time. Adding on the fact that Sang Feihong's Five Lakes sect had spread all sorts of stories about him, the noble ladies of Jiangnan would often talk about him during their leisure time. This caused Shun Bijuan, who had never been interested in the matters of Jianghu, to become curious about him. This was especially true for her close friend, Liu Wushuang. Every time she mentioned Song Qingshu, she would become excited, describing him as an unparalleled hero. This made her even more interested in this legendary man. Shin Bijuan thought of Song Qingshu's fairy-like stories and immediately felt a sense of anticipation. Noticing Shun Bijuan's expectant gaze, Zhao Min smiled at her, causing her to blush slightly. Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh. With Zhao Min's rosy lips and white teeth, pretending to be a young master, he was extremely attractive to women. However, Shui was a little unromantic. Instead, there was a kind of fanaticism in his eyes. I've long heard your great name. I wanted to challenge you twice before, but I didn't get what I wanted. As the saying goes, nothing can happen more than 3 times. Today, let's see if your sword chi is stronger or if my treasured sword is sharper. The first time was when he blocked a sedan chair on the streets of Linen, but his younger sister, Shui Baochai, persuaded him to leave. The second time was when he was outside Linen City, and he was struck by Western Xia's Class 1 hull's sorrowful, softening wind. Hence, Shui had always been brooding over the fact that he did not fight against Song Qing-shu. Right now, when he saw him again, the anger that he had been suppressing in his heart instantly erupted. A cold glare shone, and Shui drew his sword. This sword was as flawless as the white clouds in the clear sky. This attack came from below, and the momentum of the sword was brilliant and swift. It contained a sword chi that could chill even the bones. The sword's edge was so terrifying that it could not be blocked. Xiaomin only saw a sword light fly at a diagonal angle. It was as fast as lightning, like a rainbow cutting through the sky, but the smile on his face didn't change. Shun Bijuan was filled with admiration when she saw this from below. She thought that even though she was so far away, she still felt weak from the momentum of this sword, but Shui did not even frown, as expected of someone who could banish immortals from the legends. Shun Bijuan was filled with admiration, but Zhao Min groaned in her heart. It wasn't that she didn't want to move, but that Shui Yi's sword was too terrifying. The air around her seemed to have frozen. She wanted to move, but she discovered that her acupoints were sealed. The fear in her bones made her unable to move. Am I going to die like this? Zhao Min's mind was blank. There was only one thought left in her mind. Song Qing-shu, who had been blamed by Shui Yi, also turned pale with fright. He had never seen Shimin Shueishue's sword god smile or Yi Gucheng's transcendent flying immortal, but he believed that their sword techniques were on par with Shui Yi's sword technique. Of course, he couldn't just watch as Zhao Min died. He waved his hand, and a green sword chi condensed in the air in front of Zhao Min. It blocked Shui Yi's earth-shattering sword. However, it was a sword chi that he had sent from so far away. Although it could block Shui Yi's sword, it couldn't force him back. At this moment, Shui Yi's shock was no less than his own. He's just standing there, and he hasn't even raised his hand, but he's actually able to condense such a powerful sword chi. His martial arts have already reached such a high level. Although he could sense that the other party's sword chi was slightly weaker than his own, the terrifying thing was that the other party had only casually struck out with his sword. The other party did not even blink or move. This made him feel that the other party was extremely unfathomable. Therefore, he felt a little fearful and did not dare to continue attacking. Whether it was Shui Yi or Shun Bijuan, both of them had focused on what they were doing. That was why there was such a misunderstanding. Now that Zhao Min had escaped death, her back was soaked in cold sweat. She couldn't help but curse Song Qing-shu to death. I won't pretend to be someone with the surname Song anymore. He's playing with his life. What kind of enemies does this bastard have to provoke every day? Just as Shui was hesitating, a clamor of shouts came from nearby. It was clear that the guards of the Wei Manor had finally reacted. A large number of experts were rushing over. Although Shui Yi's martial arts were high, it was difficult for him to fight against so many people. With so many guards rushing over, he could only retreat. Next time, I'll choose a time and place where no one will disturb me before I fight King Qi to my heart's content. Shui cupped his hands, and his tone became more respectful. After all, although they didn't fight, the formless sword was enough to make him treat Shui Yi as an opponent of the same level. Zhao Min could only barely maintain a faint smile. After Shui Yi left, she glared at Song Qing-shu in annoyance and prepared to leave as well. However, this flirtatious and angry look of hers would naturally have different meanings in the eyes of different people. Song Qing-shu naturally understood the meaning behind it, but because he was standing next to Shun Bijuan thought that the look was directed at her. Zhao Min already had a pair of soul-stirring eyes. Coupled with the lingering power of the previous battle, this look caused Shun Bijuan's heart to beat faster and her mouth to go dry. Seeing that he was about to leave, Shun Bijuan didn't know where she found the courage to step forward and call out to him, "Prince Song." Zhao Min stopped and turned around with a smile that wasn't a smile on her face. "What's the matter, great beauty?" To the side, Song Qing-shu was incomparably depressed. Zhao Min was currently using his identity to flirt with girls, which made him feel very strange. Shen Bijuan's face heated up. In the past, if she had encountered such a frivolous and dissolute young master, she would have immediately stormed off. But this time, for some reason, she didn't feel the slightest bit angry. On the contrary, she gracefully bowed and said, "This little woman is the daughter of Imperial Censor Shen Yan. Now that the Shun clan has been exterminated and I have been abducted 1,000 li away, I have nowhere to go. I hope that young master can lend me a hand." Her voice was already extremely pleasant to listen to, and now that she was overcome with sorrow, her voice became even more moving. Any man who heard it would probably soften their heart. Unfortunately, the object of her confession was a woman. Zhao Min indifferently replied, "Why should I help you?" Chapter 1540. Ever since she was a child, Shun Bijuan had always been a proud daughter of heaven. She had a good family background and was beautiful. She was also a famous talented woman in the circle. All kinds of advantages made her very popular among the younger generation, who knew how many princes had expressed their affection for her. If she nodded, there might even be a prince who would run to the sky and give it to her. She hadn't expected that when she took the initiative to ask for help, she would be directly rejected. However, during this period of time, her pride had almost been destroyed, especially when even the higher-ups from the Imperial City Department wanted to kill her, which shattered her last bit of fantasy. Although she was still alive, what was the difference between her and being dead? The people of Xinyuan were all dead, and the country had abandoned her. A weak girl already had no country and no home. Now that she was rejected by Song Qing-shu, it was like the last straw that broke the camel's back, causing her usually clear eyes to be filled with a gray and white aura. "That's right. Why would you help such an unlucky person like me?" Shen Bijuan smiled self-mockingly. She had no value at all and was a hot potato. Song Qing-shu had just been conferred the title of Prince of Qi by the Southern Song dynasty. Why would he risk the wrath of the world to save an abandoned crown princess like her? At the side, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but sigh that Zhao Min was truly a troublesome seductress. No matter if it was a man or a woman, she could always make them worry with just a few words. Song Qing-shu glanced at her and sent a secret message. Hey, you're making it hard for me to work in the future." Zhao Min's mouth twitched, and she muttered in a small voice, Fine. You have tender feelings for the fairer sex." Shen Bijuan stilled. What did young master say? Because they were a bit far away, and Zhao Min's voice was soft, she didn't hear clearly. Zhao Min reacted quickly and smiled. "Miss Shun, don't worry. It's not that I don't want to help you, but the time is not right." At this time, the guards of the Wei Manor were about to arrive. She didn't dare delay and hurriedly left behind a few words. That's right, just as she was about to jump down the wall, she suddenly turned around and said, "I saw that the person beside you was fearless in the face of danger just now and is extremely quick-witted. Miss Shun should get closer to him." With a chuckle, she used her qinggong and disappeared into the night. Song Qing-shu was instantly dumbfounded. What was Zhao Min doing? Wasn't she putting him on the fire to roast? He just wanted to keep a low profile and investigate Murong Jingwei. But now that he was involved with Shun Bijuan, how could he keep a low profile? As expected, Shen Bijuan looked at him with a much gentler gaze than before. "Thank you so much for today." Song Qing-shu grimaced. "Anyone else would have helped you, not to mention that the one who saved you was Prince Song. He's the legendary godly person who can summon the wind and summon the rain. I didn't believe it before, but now it seems that he really does live up to his reputation. In any case, he was the one being praised, so he didn't mind praising him a bit more. Prince Song is indeed not an ordinary person." A trace of light appeared in Shun Bijuan's eyes again, but she continued, "Young Master Zhao, there is no need to undervalue yourself. If you hadn't helped me just now, Bijuan would have died long ago, so it is natural to thank young master." Song Qing-shu felt a chill when he heard this. "Don't keep calling me young master. You hated me to death before, but now you keep calling me young master. It sounds strange. Shin Bijuan blushed. I misunderstood young master before. It was Bijuan's fault. I hope young master can forgive me. Don't. Song Qingshu hurriedly waved his hand. I am only a zither master in the estate. If you keep calling me young master and King Wei hears it, I will be in deep trouble. Right now, he only wanted to keep a low profile in King Wei's estate. He didn't want to attract anyone's attention. Otherwise, the chances of him being exposed would increase. Shin Bijuan wasn't stupid. She knew that with his status, it wasn't appropriate to address him like this. Then I'll call you Mr. Zhao in the future. That's fine. Song Qingshu nodded. In this era, people didn't use the term Mr. to refer to their husbands like in the future. It was more of a respectful title for fortune tellers, feng shui masters, storytellers, and other metaphysical or artistic workers. Now that he was a zither master, it wasn't inappropriate for her to call him Mr. By this time, Yalu Isin had arrived with a large group of people. Seeing the mess in the courtyard, he couldn't help but frown and ask, "What happened?" Shin Bijuan recounted what had just happened, but to Song Qingshu's surprise, she hid the fact that Zhao Min had come. Instead, she said that Shui Yi's men had been forced to retreat after hearing that the guards of King Wei's estate had arrived. I forgot to remind her just now. Song Qingshu wiped his sweat in relief. If she had mentioned Zhao Min, his whereabouts would have been exposed. At that time, it would be even more difficult to catch Morong Jingwei. The people of the Imperial City Department are really going overboard. Yalu Isin snorted angrily. He immediately ordered his subordinates to inform the Secret Bureau and the City Defense Army to arrest the people of the Imperial City Department. After giving the order, Yalu Isin looked at Song Qingshu strangely. Hey, why are you here? Shin Bijuan hurriedly explained for him, saying that it was thanks to him that they had been delayed. Yalu Isin was very happy and waved his pen. Reward. You will be heavily rewarded. Shin Bijuan was related to a great plan, and nothing could happen to her. Knowing that Zhao Wei had saved her, he was naturally happy. After asking someone to take Zhao Wei away to receive the reward, Yalu Isin said to Shin Bijuan, Miss Shun, now you should understand that you have been abandoned by the country. Only by cooperating with me and listening to me can you fulfill your wish. When he spoke, he dispersed the people around him, but he didn't expect that Song Qingshu's skills were profound. Although he had already left the courtyard, he could still hear their conversation. No wonder Shin Bijuan agreed to enter the palace as a concubine. Song Qingshu sighed inwardly. The Shun family was destroyed. Not only could the identity of the crown princess not help her, but it would also bring her a fatal disaster. Now, the only thing he could rely on was the Liao kingdom. Yes, I still had a trace of fantasy before, but now I have completely figured out. Shin Bijuan nodded. Although her voice was weak, it was full of determination. Because there were others around, it was inconvenient for Song Qingshu to stay outside and eavesdrop, so he could only leave with that person. However, he didn't have to worry about what Yalu Isin would do to Shin Bijuan. After all, she was about to be sent to the palace as a concubine. Before entering the palace, she would definitely be checked to see if she was innocent. Yalu Isin was in a high position, so he would know what was important. Early the next morning, Song Qingshu was still sleeping soundly when he was woken up by someone. After asking, he found out that they were going to enter the palace today. He couldn't help but be shocked. So fast. It was said that there were still a few days before. Hearing that person's explanation, he understood that after what had happened last night, Yalu Isin was worried that a long delay would bring trouble, so he had to send them to the palace early. Let's go to the palace. These past few years, he had been in and out of the palace for a long time. Song Qingshu naturally wasn't afraid. After all, Liao was a country founded by the people of the grasslands. Marriage wasn't as complicated as it was in the song. Not long after, a group of people walked toward the palace. Looking at the luxurious flower carriage in the distance, he could faintly see Shun Bijuan's beautiful figure. Song Qingshu couldn't tell what she was feeling right now, but he guessed that it wasn't joy. However, he didn't have any thoughts of saving her. First, the two of them weren't related, and second, Zhao Min was right. This wasn't the right time. But just because he didn't have such thoughts didn't mean others didn't. Suddenly, a black shadow charged out of the ground, heading straight for Shun Bijuan in the flower carriage. Chapter 1541. At first, Song Qingshu thought that Shui Yi had returned because he didn't want to see Shun Bijuan marry into the Liao Imperial Palace and bring shame to the Southern Song Imperial family. However, he quickly recognized the difference between the man's figure and Shui Yi's. Could it be an assassin? Song Qingshu couldn't understand why Shun Bijuan was in so much trouble. He had just dealt with Shui Yi yesterday, and now a new assassin had appeared out of nowhere. However, he didn't move. After yesterday's incident, Yalu Yisin was already on guard. Apart from the dowry, like himself, the rest of the guards were the best of the best. As expected, the guards disguised as the procession quickly took out their weapons and moved to block the man. However, the black-clothed man was also quite skilled. A cold light flashed in his hand as he unsheathed his saber. Even Song Qingshu, who was far away, could feel the sharp saber energy. This person's saber technique has already reached the level of a grandmaster. In time, his attainments in saber techniques will not be inferior to Shui Yi's attainments in swordsmanship. Song Qingshu objectively compared the two of them. This black-clothed man was slightly inferior to Shui Yi, but it was mainly in terms of skill and experience. Although this black-clothed man was masked, Song Qingshu could still see that he was still young and had a bright future. Song Qingshu suddenly noticed a strange phenomenon. Although the black-clothed man's saber technique was fierce, and he had defeated more than 10 guards in a few moves, those guards had only temporarily lost the ability to fight. Their lives weren't in danger. The black-clothed man was unstoppable and quickly broke through the guards' defensive circle. Of course, it wasn't because the Wei Manor's guards were useless, but because everything had happened so suddenly that the guards didn't have time to stop him. As long as the guards could recover, no matter how fierce a tiger was, it would be bitten to death by a pack of wolves. Song Qingshu frowned, worried that something might happen to Shun Bijuan. He was just about to secretly stop the black-clothed man, but what happened next caused him to pull back his hand in surprise. After the black-clothed man rushed into the carriage, he grabbed Shun Bijuan's arm. "Bijuan, I'll take you away." Song Qingshu felt like this was a melodramatic play. From the current situation, this black-clothed man wasn't an assassin, but a bride. He felt the black-clothed man's voice was familiar, but he couldn't remember who he was. However, he could tell from his words that he knew Shun Bijuan. He would wait and see how she would react. As expected, Shun Bijuan recognized him. However, she pulled back her hand and shook her head. Although her voice was weak, it was filled with determination. "I'm not leaving." "What?" The black-clothed man was stunned. It had to be known that he had made a mental struggle for a long time before he decided to take the risk to come here. Who knew that he would get such an answer in return? "Hurry up and leave. Otherwise, you'll be in danger when the guard arrive," Shun Bijuan urged. If it was half a month ago, she would be very happy to have this chance. But now she knew that Shun Yuan's family had been exterminated and she was being chased by the Song dynasty. Even if she escaped, what could she do? Shun Bijuan urged. If it was half a month ago, she would have been very happy to have such an opportunity. But now, she knew that the Shun family had been exterminated and she was being chased by the Song dynasty. Even if she escaped, what could she do? Although Song Qingshu was far away, he could still hear their conversation. He thought of all the people that Shun Bijuan might know, who would appear here to save her and be skilled with the saber. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. He finally remembered who this black-clothed man was. He was Xiao 11th Lang, who was entangled with Shun Bijuan in the original work. He hadn't thought that in this world, the two of them would have a similar relationship based on fate. Presumably, the time they spent together on the road from Lin and a Shangjing had caused Xiao 11th Lang to unknowingly fall in love with this fated woman. Song Qingshu thought that it was no wonder he felt the other person was familiar. He had seen Xiao 11th Lang at Xiao Xiaoma's place and had fought with him. That was why he felt the other's voice was familiar, but he couldn't remember. At this time, Xiao 11th Lang noticed the determination in Shun Bijuan's eyes and knew that she wouldn't go with him. In addition, the nearby guards were gradually surrounding them. He knew that if he stayed any longer, he would die here. Helplessly, he could only look deeply at Shun Bijuan. Then he used his Qing Gong and disappeared into the distance using the complicated terrain. Song Qing Shu secretly complained, wondering why Xiao 11th Lang had to do it in broad daylight if he wanted to snatch the bride, especially on such a heavily guarded day like today. The degree of difficulty was many levels higher. Could it be that the hero complex in his bones was causing him to think that this would move the bride even more? As he silently cursed, this little interlude did not affect the procession. After all, Yalu Isin's subordinates had made all kinds of preparations beforehand, and this kind of disturbance was expected. The rest of the journey was calm. Very quickly, they arrived at the Liao Imperial Palace. Shun Bijuan's flower carriage was led through the palace gates by the servants. A gentle breeze blew past and coincidentally lifted a corner of the curtain, revealing her sorrowful but devastatingly beautiful face. To the side, many palace maids and eunuchs couldn't help but discuss, "This new concubine is as beautiful as a fairy. In the future, she will definitely be doted upon." "I don't think so. The Empress's appearance is not inferior to hers." "That's true." Hearing the whispers of these people, Song Qing couldn't help but be curious. What kind of person was this Empress they spoke of? In their hearts, she was on par with Shun Bijuan's appearance? Someone had already come to lead the dowry in another direction. Song Qing was not surprised. After thinking about it, he could not go in and out with the Emperor's concubine. However, he was not picky about his living environment. It was fine as long as there was a bed. He began to think about how to find possible traces of Murong Jingwei in the Imperial Palace. Before he knew it, he had already arrived. After being led into the room, Song Qing suddenly realized something was wrong. This did not look like a place for people to live in. Feeling the temperature in the air was several degrees higher than outside, and seeing the small shovels in the hands of the eunuchs, and the moaning that came from some of the rooms, Song Qing couldn't help but pause. He instinctively raised his head and saw the 3 words on a signboard, "Ceremonial Room." "What's going on?" Song Qing was dazed for a moment. Then someone led them to their own small rooms. "Lie down." An old eunuch glanced at him and said coolly. At the same time, he played with a small shining shovel to sterilize the fire. "What is this place?" Song Qing expression was not good. He had a faint guess in his heart. Of course, it is a place to be cleansed. The old eunuch had no intention of paying attention to him. Instead, it was the person who had led him here who explained, "The Imperial Palace cannot allow men to enter as they please, so you musicians as part of the dowry have to be cleansed." "What?" Chapter 1542. Before entering the palace, Song Qing had imagined a lot of possible scenarios. He had even thought of a plan to expose his identity as soon as he entered, but he had never thought of this. The famous king of golden snakes, who had many confidants, had been sent to the ceremonial office to be castrated. If outsiders knew about this, they would probably laugh their heads off. "Are you kidding me? I'm a musician, not a eunuch." Song Qing was speechless. He subconsciously moved back, but unfortunately, he had already been stopped from behind. Ordinary musicians don't need to be castrated, but musicians like you who are going to be a concubine often go in and out of the palace. "How can you not be castrated?" The person who led him explained. However, the old eunuch in the room was obviously used to it. He snorted impatiently, "Don't dilly-dally, there are people waiting behind you." Just as he finished speaking, a few eunuchs came over and grabbed Song Qing hands, wanted to tie him to the operating table. Song Qing expression changed. Although he wanted to sneak into the Imperial Palace to investigate Murong Jingyue's whereabouts, even if he had to sacrifice a little, it definitely didn't include sacrificing a man's life. Of course, A few eunuchs could not stop Song Qing-shu. He was thinking about sending them flying and then killing his way out of the palace. Suddenly, he had an idea. He could use the soul transfer spell to brainwash these people, making them subconsciously think that he had already done it, so that he could continue his task. Just as he was about to do it, there was a knock on the door. The people in the room stopped, and the door opened. A white and fat eunuch stood at the door. Judging by his clothes, he seemed to have a high status in the palace. The old eunuch in the room had a dead face, but when he saw the eunuch, he hurriedly smiled and went out to greet him. The rapid change in his flattering attitude made Song Qing-shu feel sick. The two of them whispered a few words, and the old eunuch suddenly looked embarrassed. "I'm afraid this is a little inappropriate. Now the palace is lacking musicians. After being cut by you, you will not be able to get out of bed for at least 2 months. By then, it will be too late." The eunuch saw that he still wanted to say something and impatiently waved his hand. "Don't worry. If there's anything, I'll take responsibility." The old eunuch didn't have anything else to say. He could only allow them to take him away. Song Qing-shu followed behind the eunuch, but he was very surprised. His skills were profound, and the conversation between the two people at the door just now could not escape his ears. Although the reason the eunuch gave him seemed reasonable, in reality, it was not tenable at all. It should be known that the Forbidden Palace was very guarded against men. If one was not careful, heads would roll. Although the eunuch's position in the palace was not low, there was no need for him to take such a big risk for someone who was not related to him. Unless Song Qing-shu suddenly thought of the movie The Deer and the Cauldron that he had watched in his previous life. Wei Xiaobao was brought into the palace by Haidafu when he was about to be castrated. The reason why Haidafu did not mind whether he was castrated or not was because he needed to send him to die as cannon fodder. He wouldn't be able to live for more than a few days anyway, so it didn't matter if he was castrated or not. Song Qing-shu was shocked. It seemed that this eunuch had ulterior motives. He had an idea and asked tentatively, "How should I address you, eunuch?" "My surname is Gao," the eunuch answered. "Thank you, eunuch Gao, for today," Song Qing-shu said casually. "Please thank Prince Wei on my behalf, eunuch Gao." The eunuch was stunned. He was obviously a little surprised, but he still nodded. "Prince Wei must have trusted you since he sent you here. Do well, young man." "It really is Yelu Isin." Song Qing-shu had expected it to be him. With his cultivation, he could naturally see that the eunuch in front of him was just an ordinary person and not someone like Eunuch Hai. No matter how bold an eunuch was, there was no reason for him to do such a thing. It was most likely that someone had instructed him to do so, and the most suspicious person was Yelu Isin. After all, he had put in a lot of effort to recruit the musician and had even captured Zhao Wei's parents, wife, and children to threaten them. He would not have done anything in vain. Now, it seemed that he wanted him to enter the palace to complete a dangerous task. However, he hadn't received any notification yet, so he didn't know what he wanted him to do for the time being. He was led by eunuch Gao to a courtyard in the palace. The eunuch said, "You can rest here for the next few days. Someone will bring you food on time. Don't run around if you have nothing to do. After all, normal people can't get out of bed for a month or 2 after being castrated. Don't fall into the eyes of others and be suspected." Song Qing-shu was originally worried that his work as a musician would make it difficult for him to move around. Now that he was arranged to live in such a secluded place without anyone to control him, it was exactly what he wanted. After sending off eunuch Gao, he was thinking about going to the palace to investigate when he suddenly heard a knock on the door. Song Qing-shu was stunned. Who would be looking for him at this time? After opening the door, he was even more shocked because it was Shun Bijuan standing at the door. "Miss Shun?" Of course, Song Qing-shu was a bit surprised. Today was the day she would enter the palace. Although the emperor was in court and couldn't sleep with her, there was no need for her to run around like this. "Mr. Zhao," Shin Bijuan gently called out to him with a strange expression. In the end, she said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Mr. Zhao. I only learned not long ago that you were sent to for a young lady of a noble family. That kind of place was very difficult to speak of. However, Song Qingshu understood that she also knew that he had been sent to the household of servants. I originally wanted to save you, but you know that I can't protect myself right now, and no one will listen to me when I enter the palace, so. Shin Bijuan's face was full of guilt. After all, the person in front of her had saved her yesterday. Today, he had suffered the greatest humiliation a man could suffer because of her. She didn't know how to comfort him. Miss, don't take it to heart. This is my destiny. Song Qingshu gave a self-mocking smile and began to comfort her. Of course, this was because he hadn't been truly hurt. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the mood to pay attention to her. At the same time, he sighed with emotion that Shun Bijuan was a young miss of a boudoir and didn't have much knowledge about physiology. Otherwise, looking at his rosy complexion and the fact that he could still stand here and chat with her, he didn't look like he had been cut by a knife. The two of them chatted a bit more before Shun Bijuan said apologetically, Mr. Zhao, I secretly found a palace made to send me here. I must go back. I can't harm others. As she spoke, she took off a jade bracelet from her wrist and placed it in Song Qingshu's hand. I don't have anything I can help you with right now. This jade bracelet is still worth a bit of money. Take it and buy some supplements to nourish your body. In reality, everything in the palace costs money. After speaking, she didn't wait for him to object and hurriedly left. Holding the jade bracelet that was still warm from her body, Song Qingshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This girl's heart was quite kind. Putting away the jade bracelet, Song Qingshu's attention returned to proper business. He decided to use this opportunity to go to the emperor's place and investigate. He had a faint feeling that he would be able to obtain some useful information from there. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.